All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. Let's get through this together, everybody. Let's get through this early going of the season, through this week one disaster against the Vikings, through the organization's turmoil, the indecision, the confusion about where this is going, what it means for the Giants present, for their future, where they stand, and what decisions are coming up on deck for them. Obviously, we're talking about really the general manager seat, the head coaching seat, the quarterback's job, Daniel Jones. The latest news on Daniel is that he will remain the starter for week 2 against the Washington Commanders. That's straight from Brian Daboll. Not only that, Daniel Jones will be the starter, and Daboll and the Giants are, according to the head coach, not considering or discussing bringing in another quarterback if Jones, for some reason, ends up getting benched or not being the starter at some point. Daboll did say Drew Lock is healthy enough to play as normal if needed. However, he gives Daniel Jones all the snaps in practice, and he has no plans. I asked him directly. He has no plans to change the way that he runs practice with the quarterbacks, no plans to add snaps or change the rep count for Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito behind Daniel Jones. So, despite the outcry, despite the frustration, and despite the fact that, as we all know, Daniel Jones didn't play well enough and a lot of the fan base doesn't want to see him under center anymore, the organization is going to continue to run him out there. And we all know that it has to turn around now or it's not going to turn around at all. Washington Commanders, week 2 on the road. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why they're maybe making this decision with Daniel at the moment, where it stands, and why I feel the organization is going this route and what the potential ramifications are. We will get into that. I hope all of you already checked out First Down with Benny Fowler. That's going to be our weekly Monday recap of the action around the league. So we talked Giants. We also talked CJ Stroud and the Texans. We talked Dak Prescott, new contract, and the Dallas Cowboys, Saquon Barkley, Kansas City Chiefs, and some surprises that popped up, top storylines, the crazy Tyreek Hill incident, and then him scoring that touchdown, doing the handcuff celebration. We get into all of the nuts and bolts of the top storylines throughout the league. But we also talked Giants, and Benny Fowler played with Daniel Jones here in New York. He's a good friend of Daniel's. He respects him a lot. But even Benny had just direct words to say about Daniel's job and his performance. He said, "You're getting paid a lot of money to perform at a high level. You're the quarterback, and you can't keep making the same mistakes." And he said, basically, it comes down to you're not seeing progress. You're seeing the same old. You're not seeing a progression of the quarterback's development there, of the skills being honed and augmented and improved, and the offense taking off. And it falls on the coach. It falls on the roster construction that Benny described as not complementary and not fitting together as a whole. But it does stand on Daniel Jones, even if it's a little too much to see fans heckling him coming out of the players' entrance, as we saw in that video after the game. It does hold that the booing is for a reason, and it is justified. The play is not good enough. The team is not good enough all the way on down, and it starts with the QB. I want to tell you about our sponsors, and then we're going to get right into some encouraging and positive quarterback talk, and we will get to our trivia question, where the first fan who gets the trivia question correct will win a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee. Estate 98, of course, one of our sponsors here on Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. We are brought to you here by Estate 98 Coffee, an all-natural specialty coffee with no sugar that is convenient for on-the-go professionals and parents. Takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced coffee and only a minute more to make a hot coffee or latte from this all-natural concentrate. Go to estate98.com/talkinball to get a special buy one, get one free deal. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health. With its beta glucans and antioxidants, go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code on your screen, Talkin Ball 25, or the QR code that you see here below, you'll get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Right now, that means a month's supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. Also brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And our trivia question today takes us to a topic that I think will put some smiles on Giants fans' faces, especially the Giants fans who have already thrown in the towel on this version of the team. And this has to do with the top quarterbacks in college football in NCAA Division I. And the Giants potentially with a number 2, 3, 4, 5 overall pick next year, if they continue on the trajectory they showed us in week 1, in the market for a quarterback, for a top quarterback, for a first round quarterback. And some of the names that stand out right now in the Heisman race, right? Quinn Ewers, University of Texas, Cam Ward at Miami, Jackson Dart, Ole Miss. Shedeur Sanders, of course, loses to Nebraska, falls out of that Heisman leading candidate contender chase, but a name to watch. And of course, Carson Beck from Georgia. So those are some of the quarterbacks we're going to talk about here quickly as we get into where the Giants are looking and what directions they may go. And my trivia question is a simple one. Of the names I just read, of those top college quarterbacks I just talked about, that could be on the Giants' radar at the top of the first round next year, which of them has the most passing yards through 2 weeks of the college football season? Again, they are Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, Carson Beck, Jackson Dart, and Shedeur Sanders. Which quarterback has the most passing yards of those 5 through the first 2 college football weeks? If you answer that question right, and whoever is first in answering that question correct wins a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee. Looks like the winner is in. It is D Kit, says Dart, Jackson Dart. Danny Duds, you were just behind. Just missed it. But D Kit is correct. It is Jackson Dart with 795 passing yards across 2 weeks. So here's where we stand. To me, the guys who have stood out the most that I want to see more from, I guess in this order, I would say Ewers and Dart right at the top with Carson Beck right there as well. And then Cam Ward, and then Shedeur Sanders under that. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, 6'2", 225, 795 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and an 87% completion percentage. 2-0 combined record. They've outscored their opponents 128-3 against Furman and Middle Tennessee State. Obviously not the toughest competition right off the bat. But nonetheless, Jackson Dart's stats look amazing. Got some size to him at 6'2", 225. Ole Miss will be at Wake Forest, so the schedule will start to get a little bit more legitimate here as we go. We will see how they hold up once they get into the bulk of their SEC competition. But interesting player to watch if you're the Giants, and really, regardless of whether it's Joe Shane, Brian Daboll, or whoever is making the pick next year for the Giants, I do think that these are names that you should start to familiarize yourself with, that we will do even a weekly tracker of throughout the season here on Talkin Ball Live, because this is definitely the list of players that the Giants are among the list of players that the Giants are scouting, that they're looking out closely. D-Kit, make sure you send me on Instagram, DM me on Instagram, the PL on NFL on Instagram, DM me your address or your P.O. box, wherever you want me to send it, and we will have a bottle of Estate 98 coffee shipped out to you. D-Kit sets a good example, guys. Remember, we answer all fan questions here on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard If you purchase a super chat or super sticker, it will be elevated to the top of the chat, the top of the queue, and we will get right into your question or comment first before then getting back into the queue. So DKit purchases a super chat, $5. Thank you, DKit. He says, I rewatched the game. Daniel Jones can't pull the trigger. He has the yips. It's glaring and can't be fixed. Sad, but true. I agree that there were several occasions where he either had time to make a throw to a receiver, or at the very least, even if under pressure, because he's able to escape and move and keep a play alive, he then had opportunities to, let's say, extend a play and throw it away and live to see another play and not take a big hit, and then holds the ball because he's trying to make something happen and ends up taking a big hit. Maybe it's an incompletion. Maybe it's a bad decision, whatever the case may be. He did have that one throw to Malik Neighbors in max protect, where I think it was only like 2 receivers going out against 6 coverage guys in the back in the secondary for Brian Flores' defense, and ripped it over top of the corner to Neighbors for 20-some yard gain. I think that was in the third quarter, maybe, or the second quarter. That was an excellent throw. And that's kind of the stuff too that drives you crazy when you see those exciting moments and that high level of skill and physical talent pop up for Daniel. And then you see the other stuff creep up. D-Kit, you get me into the conversation there about why continue with Daniel Jones as the starter here. And I think what you see is this is an organization that, while they spent a lot of the spring looking to replace Daniel Jones and find his successor, and Daniel Jones knows that and is under that pressure, ownership, now that they're running it back with Daniel, wants to give him a fair shake and a fair shot with better weapons, better structure. This actually makes me feel like it's a very interesting dynamic so coming out of the week 1 game, given how they performed and how they underperformed and how bad it was, I felt like very clearly, even listening to the fans, the order of the hot seat that you see for quarterback, GM, coach, right? Who's on the hottest seat? To me, you come out of that game, it's pretty obvious. It's Daniel Jones, hottest seat, then Brian Daboll, and then Joe Shane, even though they're all pretty hot in my opinion. But staying with Daniel Jones as starting quarterback. Now, first, I'll say this. In August, I said, and we said on this chat, that you make a decision about who you're going to start at quarterback. And even if it doesn't start the way that you want it to, you don't pull the plug immediately, because if you do, it indicates you're essentially saying right away, we just went through a whole summer and we couldn't accurately adjudge who our best quarterback was. We apologize. We made a mistake, right? That is what you're doing if you pull the plug after 1 week. Now, that's what I said in August. That's what I believe. But isn't it difficult sitting there looking at the product on the field and looking at how Jones was playing? It's hard to watch that and say there isn't a better option here, right? But it wasn't just Daniel Jones. And I don't want the conversation to just be about Daniel Jones, because to me, this is an organizational failure. This is an organization that essentially is constantly, apparently, preparing for the future. But at some point, you have to, at some point, you need to look at the team, look at the makeup, and say, okay, yes, we're rebuilding. Yes, we inherited a mess, but we need to have a competent product and a competitive product on the field, because 3 years of building a team, even if your quarterback is struggling and holding you back, does not yield the type of result that you saw on Sunday unless all the pieces around that quarterback are also failing. Like, you can have a mediocre quarterback or a struggling quarterback and still look like a team. Like, think about the Jets last year when Rodgers got hurt, right? You could tell, like, you could watch those games. That's actually a great example, because, I have my screen over here. I got the Jets-Niners game on Monday Night Football as we talk. The Jets last year were a team that you and I and everybody could look at and say, this isn't going how anybody wants it to, but I can see watching this team on the field that if Aaron Rodgers was healthy or if they had even competent quarterback play, that they would be probably pretty good because their defense was good. They had the infrastructure, they had the talent, right? They had even the talent on the offensive side of the ball at skill positions if they just had a quarterback. So that is what a team looks like when only the quarterback is failing. This is not a situation where it's only the quarterback failing. But not defending Daniel either here. I'm just saying, um, as we talk around where the pressure exists, I think that it's on Daniel. He didn't play well enough. Everybody knows it. I know it. You know it. It has to be better. And it does appear like he has the yips. I agree. But the point I was getting at there was when you stick with Daniel Jones, let's say you go into week 2, you stick with Daniel Jones. Let's say you lose to Washington and you continue to stick with Daniel, even though he plays poorly in that game as well. Now I start to think about, let me think, right? If Daniel Jones remains in the lineup and ownership doesn't view this as a situation where it's fair or inevitable that Daniel is going to be pulled, then you start to evaluate, okay, how strongly right away, week 1, week 2, week 3, are they evaluating Brian Daboll as somebody who's going to even finish this season, right? Because that could vault Brian Daboll to the hotter seat over top of Daniel Jones, right? If ownership wants to give Daniel a season here, if ownership wants to ride it out as far as they can with Daniel Jones, this also could be turned on its head, even from the front office, from ownership to, we paid the quarterback. We might be moving on from him next year. We might be drafting his successor next year. We've been greasing the skids for that. The contract is arranged that way. But are we, the New York Giants, instead going to say, okay, Brian Daboll, you're the play caller. You're the guy who's most of his staff wanted to leave last year because they didn't want to work with you anymore. Show us that you can develop a quarterback. Show us that you are the offensive mind we think you are and that we hired you to be, or else it's going to be you first and then Daniel next, right? I think that is a potential kind of swing factor and one element of the dynamic here that I am watching. Thank you for that super chat, D Kit. Alley Cat checks in with $5. Thank you, Alley Cat. Alley Cat says, Pat, you said yesterday Jones was the best quarterback on the team. I want to know, were you high? Ray Charles can see DeVito plays with more heart and kill. Do you mean skill or or he's a killer? I mean, either way, that's a good way. That's a good way to describe how you feel about him. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, Alley Cat, I do. You can clearly see the fan base wants to see anybody but Daniel Jones behind center now. I mean, that's obvious. I know DeVito's popular, especially locally. He is not as talented as Daniel. He is not as good of a quarterback as Daniel. And listen, they practice every day. Okay. DeVito did not have a good training camp like this summer. They almost cut him last summer, right before the start of the season, coming out of training camp. He was not wowing anybody. He just kind of hung around. And listen, credit to Tommy. I mean, Tommy is super confident in himself. He stayed ready for when his moment came. He capitalized on it with a lot of help from the Giants defense at that time under Wink Martindale as well. And, I think what gets overlooked, Alley Cat, I'm not saying you're overlooking this, but I do think this is something important to remember. Like, Tommy does struggle getting rid of the ball. He's shorter, seeing downfield, holding the ball too often, leading to a lot of sacks. That's why the sack numbers were so high when he was in the game last year, and why ultimately kind of the bloom was off the rose of even though that was a great story there with Tommy DeVito. I still think that Alley Cat Daniel he's mobile, and Tommy can run too, but Daniel's mobile. He has a better arm. He's bigger. He's taller. He's stronger. He's faster. He has more command of the offense as well. There's a lot of reasons why Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Tommy DeVito. Now, that said, Alley Cat, you bring up a good point, which is that you and many fans like you you guys feel like there needs to be a different element of competitiveness from that position on the team. You watch the game on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings, and what you're saying is essentially, for lack of a better term, you're saying the vibes of the offense and of the team are as low as can be, right? You're saying the vibes of the team, the way that they come out of the huddle, your confidence in what they're going to be able to do is lower with Daniel than Tommy. I understand that element. I think that's a very real thing. I don't think that's anything to sneeze at all. I think that you're paying Drew Lock some guaranteed money here. You brought him in. He's a real NFL quarterback. He's got to be the next guy you go to if you go to anybody at all here, in my opinion. What I find fascinating, everybody, is, let's just be honest, they're sticking with Daniel Jones going into this week 2 game against Washington, right? I think we can all agree that this team needs to turn it around and win 2 games here against Washington and Cleveland with Dallas on deck in week 4. If they don't do that, we're looking at this really going down into the dumpster and going even lower than most people, not me, but most people expected where this was going to go. But the Giants are on the road the next 2 weeks. So it's easier for the Giants to run Daniel out there than it was on Sunday, right? Under an environment like that. I do think that environment was getting to him and getting to the team. And we'll get into that talking about Kayvon and the defense later. But I find it so interesting that they kind of have some breathing room here to work with Daniel and with the team. But they come back for a Thursday night football game against the Dallas Cowboys in week 4. I believe it is, September 26th, I think it is. And that, to me, is the date to circle for a lot of things. That's the date to circle for a lot of things, including for Daniel Jones. All right. Going to get into more of the queue. Alley Cat, thank you for that super chat and for that point, because you do speak for a lot of fans there. In fact, I do know that there were some heavy sections early on, like as early as the second quarter of the game on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings, that were chanting Tommy DeVito's name, like really early in that game. So super interesting there. Before I get to the rest of the questions here, please check out, I wrote another column for the New York Daily News. I think you guys will enjoy it. Obviously, frustrating points to go over about what's going wrong with the team. But I think the crux of it is that I feel like the fan base really is over this quarterback and this regime and this team for now, unless something dramatic changes, and getting into why that is. But some news to clean up coming out of the Giants Monday after the game. Darius Slayton, the team's number 2 wide receiver on the depth chart, is in the concussion protocol, according to Brian Daboll. So we were not in the building today. We talked to Brian Daboll, Jason Pinnock, and John Runyon Jr. on Zoom. Slayton did talk to the media after the game, but of course, concussions present differently. Sometimes they're delayed. It's different for everybody, and every concussion is different. So unfortunate to see. But Slayton, who was he was placed at punt returner with the Gunnar Olszewski fiasco and him not getting onto the field. So Slayton ends up as the punt returner, now in the concussion protocol. Starting corner Nick McLeod. So Slayton, we'll see, right? He's iffy, therefore, for Sunday against the Washington Commanders. But we'll see when we get on the field Wednesday and Thursday how much he is able to do. Starting corner Nick McLeod has a knee injury. Daboll said he's day-to-day or maybe week-to-week. He's looking for clarification on that. Gunnar Olszewski, the punt returner, is out for weeks, according to Daboll, with that groin injury he aggravated. And then special teams linebacker Carter Coughlin has a pec injury and is out months. Of course, that means it's a torn pec. And he's placed on the practice squad injured list. So a core special teamer now unavailable to the Giants, possibly for the season there. The Giants did sign a punt returner after a workout on Monday, a guy named Amir Smith-Marset. He is from Newark, New Jersey originally, a Vikings 5th-round pick in 2021. He played for the Panthers last year. He's played 33 games for 4 teams in his career. Last season for the Panthers, 37 punt returns, 322 yards returning, including a 79-yard touchdown against the Bears in Week 10. Also had a 20-yard touchdown run on offense for Carolina as well. The team did add linebacker Curtis Bolton back to the practice squad and all of this roster shuffling. I think for financial reasons. I can't figure out another reason why. I think it has to do with, guarantees on contracts. I mean, I have to get to the bottom of that, but definitely seems like it's, kind of pencil pushing on the money side as much as anything. So those are the details that are important to know about the roster that come out of the Giants Monday cleanup from their Week 1 28-6 loss to the Vikings. Just as a confirmation here, the Jets have 7 points and the Niners have 13, as the Niners are driving prior to the end of the first half here, looking for more. So it's official now. We are going into Week 2 with the Giants. Brian Daboll as their full-time play caller. The Giants are the lowest scoring team in the NFL entering Week 2. 6 points in Week 1. And the Jets are 3 points away. If they get 3 points, the Jets, not only will the Giants be the lowest scoring team in the league, they will also be the only team that did not score in double-digit points in Week 1. But we will see. Jets only have 7 points as the Niners appear like they're going to keep the ball till the end of the half here, maybe try to get a field goal before the half starts. Let's see. Barbara does not like Jalen Hurts. He did not play his best football in Week 1, no doubt. Dave Z says, I hope John Mara is also feeling the absolute misery he has bestowed upon the fans of his livelihood. Not even a large Pepsi can make up for the failures these past 12 years. 2016, 2022 were a fluke. Jacob Petruzzi says, smash that like and sub button for Pat on your way in. Thanks for that reminder, Jacob. Please subscribe to the channel if you don't already. And please hit the like button while we are live. Those likes while we are live tells all the Giants fans and NFL fans out there what we are doing and brings more people to this community. And right now, it's more important than ever to have a community of people to sit with, to talk to, and to bounce ideas off of, to figure out where the Giants can go, what they can do both now and in the future to turn this around. That's what we are trying to do here, as well as bringing you the most important and relevant and immediate information on your favorite team and league. Jacob says, evening, Pat. Thank you for all your prayers for my grandmother last week. You got it, Jacob. Few questions to start off. How long until we pull the plug on Jones? Is there a world where Daboll leaves and Shane stays? I think there is a world where Daboll leaves and Shane stays for sure. If a lot of the draft picks and the foundation of the team is looking encouraging talent-wise and starts getting better in that regard, but the coach, the offensive production, and the quarterback look like the only issues, that's how that can happen. I mean, I've said this before, but I do, it is true that the Giants organization, the ownership on down, they do not want, ideally, to overturn things again. That is not what they want to do. They're not looking to do that. They've bristled at the suggestion in recent years when this started to look really bad, or much earlier, at even the suggestion that they would consider overturning it. That is not in the cards. That is not what they want to do. It's not their preference. But you have to admit, there are a lot of worst case scenarios adding up. And the worst case scenario is what gets everybody fired, right? So that includes Saquon Barkley going off while the Giants haven't scored a touchdown yet, and Saquon has 3. That includes Joe Shane getting caught on a hot mic saying that it must be nice to not be looking for a quarterback to the Bears general manager. It includes the Giants losing to a Vikings team, ready for this, to a quarterback in Sam Darnold, who was the backup before J.J. McCarthy got hurt. Sam Darnold was the backup to J.J. McCarthy, a rookie quarterback who the Giants deemed not worthy of a pick high up in the first round at a position they were scouting heavily, looking for the successor to Daniel Jones. So the backup to the player the Giants wouldn't take had almost an 80% completion percentage and easily beat Shane Bowen's defense and Brian Daboll's team in Week 1. So those are the different types of contexts that we're looking at here when you evaluate how long until X, how long until Y, Jones, Daboll, Shane, not to mention John Mara's face being plastered all over social media, and essentially the Giants organization being humiliated nationally as Saquon Barkley and the Eagles are running wild in Brazil on the Green Bay Packers. By the way, Week 2 might not be any better for the Giants. the Eagles have the Atlanta Falcons in Philadelphia. That could get really ugly for Joe Shane and the Giants. They might want to close their eyes when that game crosses the television screen. But how long until they pull the plug on Jones? That's a good question. I mean, if they lose to Washington and they're just as inept in that game as they were in week 1, all bets are off on everything. But like I said, is it Daniel Jones' hottest seat right now, or does it become Brian Daboll hottest seat quicker? Because the full team meltdown that we saw in week 1 last year, that we see week 1 this year, right? The fact that the quarterback, first of all, quarterback not playing well. Second of all, offense not scoring touchdowns. Third of all, the team a mess all around. 5 drops, 9 penalties. Just a ton of mistakes and lack of discipline from the team up and down. And if they lose to Washington and the problems are throughout the team and the operation and not just the quarterback, that's maybe how Daboll could end up on a hotter seat earlier than even Daniel Jones does. But this is just my conjecture based on knowing how the organization works and how people in that organization feel about Daniel. So the bottom line I can tell you is heads will roll regardless if this losing continues and the ineptitude continues. Remember, if the quarterback struggles, Daboll's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer, right? Him, Shea Tierney, the coaches on the offensive staff, they have to get it going. Mike Kafka essentially has been sidelined from the operation. He's not on the sideline. He's not calling plays. So he's involved in conversations, but he's not involved in calling the offense. And, from what I see, often Tierney working more closely with the quarterbacks, although Kafka a part of that. Jacob says drafting Neighbors seems like 2018 all over again, drafting win now player for a team that isn't winning now. Am I wrong? Jacob, I do think Neighbors could end up being a building block piece for this team and organization and franchise, regardless of who the quarterback is next year and who the general manager and head coach is. I do think he's that talented. He's very young. He's going to have to live through some growing pains here. Even if he's playing well and it's just about, the rest of the team not supporting him or not having good enough quarterback play, I do think that he could be a building block. But, maturity-wise, he'll have to kind of handle the ups and downs of this early going the right way. I liked hearing him say that he had a drop and it wasn't acceptable and that they dropped too many passes in the middle of a lot of his answers in the locker room after the game against the Vikings, because you want to see accountability and you want to see poise. And frankly, it's hard to expect that from a 21-year-old 6th overall pick wide receiver with the expectations of New York City on his shoulders. So, I do think that's impressive. Dave Z says from 1964 to 80, the Giants record was 84, 156, and 4. Since 2012, the Giants are 67, 112, and 1. The worst stretches in franchise history. Now that's how you celebrate 100 years. You said it, Dave. I don't have much to add to that. You make a good point. Dave says, thank you, Pat, for letting us vent our continued frustrations here. You got it, Dave. Thanks for always being here. Danny Dudd says, do you think John Mara is finally going to now admit Daniel Jones was never the answer? The day he does will be gratifying. Danny, I think that John Mara believes Daniel Jones has talent and has ability and has also the demeanor to handle New York. I do think that deep down, the fact that they saw Eli Manning live through a ton of rocky seasons and games and turnovers early on and come out of it the way he did on top and become such a legend for their franchise. And now he's standing there on the field at their 100th anniversary and getting the biggest ovation of any player, right? I think that is something also that's always in the back of the Giants' minds and in the back of ownership's minds. But that can't govern the way that you handle things, just like it can't govern the way you draft quarterbacks. It can't govern the way that you stick with a quarterback. You can't just count on things to change. And let's be clear here, although I am talking about the overreaching context of the organization not being good enough, Daniel Jones's play in week 1 was completely unacceptable. And there's no defending it even from an organizational ownership standpoint. Even if you like the guy,
Daniel said it himself too. I have to play better. I'm not playing well enough. Like the pick six that he threw, talking to people today around the league about it. There's a part of me that felt like Van Ginkel looks like he anticipated that throw and was able to kind of see it coming because of like the play call and the alignment. But even if that's the case, you have to do something on that play as the quarterback. You see a defender entering your line of sight and trying to blow up the play. Do you pump fake? Do you throw it sidearm underneath him? How do you move to change the angle? Do you abandon that throw and then try to look for something else and throw it away? Right. So those are all, something that you would expect a franchise quarterback to do, Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, whoever the case may be. Those guys would make an adjustment on the fly. And that's what you need from quarterbacks, right? And that pick six, I mean, I have to be honest, as somebody who had low expectations for the season, I felt like it was going to be bad. When he made that throw for the pick six, I literally bumped the person next to me with my elbow, because in the moment, it was almost like, as much as you've seen it happen and as much as we just saw it in Houston in the preseason, watching that throw, it happened right in front of me. Watching him make that throw, it was almost like in slow motion. You're thinking, this cannot be. I mean, it was really that bad. Tuto, big time loyal Giants fan and NFL fan and follower. Tuto, thanks so much for being here. Tuto, have you seen that our Talkin Ball post-game live on Sunday after the Giants lost to the Vikings, it now has, I want to say, 5,500 views on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube page, at PL on NFL. Also on the Believe Network audio, whether you listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, that's where you can listen to the audio version of these podcasts and all of our guest podcasts, including First Down with Benny Fowler that just went up today with our breakdown of action around the league in week one. But Tuto, man, you've helped us build this community. You've been one of our strongest supporters throughout. And I knew you'd appreciate that, because we've been talking about year 2 of the Talkin Ball post-game lives really kind of taking off, and as this channel continues to grow. And you could see that we have become one of the go-to places for Giants fans to vent, discuss, find go-to immediate information and analysis and breaking news about what's coming out of the locker room, about how the players and the team are reacting, about what the team is planning, about why they're doing things that they're doing, even though it might not be as obvious as you're watching on the field. Like, I see questions about Jalen Hyatt and others in the queue that we're going to get to that I have good insight on for you all. So, that's where we're at, Tuto, and I know you'd be happy to hear that. Tuto says, massive salutes and respects to Big Boss Pat, king of New York Giants podcasts, and all diehard Giants fans across the pond. Greetings from our entire rugby team in North London. Tuto, thank you so much for being here. You're the man. You know it. Everybody here knows it. One of the diehards. Everybody here, though, listen, we all love football. We all probably have Monday Night Football on somewhere, but you're here with me. New York Daily News columnist, NFL columnist, and Giants beat writer for the Daily News. Now in my 9th season covering the team. I couldn't be happier to do it, and couldn't be happier to sit here with you guys and talk ball. All right, let's get down into the queue. Let's keep getting through these. Dave Z says, what do you think? Ewers, Beck, or a stopgap till they get Arch Manning? Well, if this season continues on this track and they have a top 5, top 6 pick, you have to take a quarterback there, Dave. I mean, I don't see how, you would. What would you do then? Like, let's say, even if it's a new regime, you have a high pick, a top 5 pick, and a good quarterback draft. What, you don't draft a QB, you draft another piece, you sign a stopgap veteran, and then what, you hope that you still have a high enough pick when Arch comes around down the road to get him. That's pretty dangerous territory. That's kind of flirting with disaster. But I'm glad you brought back up the quarterbacks in college, because I wanted to share with you guys one thing that sticks out to me when I look at these top 5 names I pulled today for the 2025 NFL draft. And by the way, Part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because I know this is exactly what people want to hear. Google Trends on Sunday at 3 p.m. Guess what spiked? The search term 2025 NFL Draft at 3 p.m. on Sunday in the New York metropolitan area. So in the New York metro area at 3 p.m. Sunday, when the Giants were still playing and Daniel Jones and the Giants offense were falling on their faces, 2025 NFL Draft starts trending on Google. Why? Because you guys know if it's not about today, it's about tomorrow. So Quinn Ewers from Texas, he's 6'2", 210, 560 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 69.8 completion percentage so far. The team is 2-0, has outscored Colorado State and Michigan combined 83-12, and they face Texas San Antonio this week. Cam Ward from Miami, 6'2", 223, 689 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, 75.4% completion. Also 2-0, 97-26 combined, outscored their opponents against Florida and Florida A&M. Face Ball State this week. Told you about Jackson Dart. Shedeur Sanders, 689, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1-1, outscored 54-41 total, including a 28-10 loss to Nebraska at Colorado State. And frankly, without digging too deep into it, but just knowing the personalities, I really find it hard to believe that Giants ownership would want Deion Sanders on ESPN talking about their starting quarterback all the time. So that's my opinion. But here's what sticks out to me. The Giants love size, especially at the quarterback position. Carson Beck, the only one on this list that's taller than 6'2". He is listed at 6'4", 220 pounds. We also know Joe Shane was at that Georgia-Clemson game. Of course, he's going to scout all these guys. But he was at the Georgia-Clemson game right to start out the season. And he's the only one who profiles with the kind of size the Giants are usually looking at. 520 passing yards so far, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 70.7 completion percentage. Georgia is 2-0. Combined score 82-6 in wins over Clemson, which was 34-3, and Tennessee Tech. And they are at Kentucky this week. We talked about Jackson Dart as well earlier. They play at Wake Forest, Ole Miss. He is 6'2", 225. So those are names that I think are interesting for us to continue to watch, continue to follow, and continue to talk about here. Tuto checks in with another super chat. Thank you so much for that, Tuto. Tuto says, Pat, last Saturday was my birthday, and also my 4th son was born the same day. Wow. And we had a massive last-minute away test win. Can't thank enough for God's blessings, mate. Man, Tuto, way to go. Congratulations. Everybody, please congratulate Tuto on his 4th son. That is amazing, Tuto. A W, a victory. That's amazing. Congratulations, Tuto, to you and your family. All the best, happy and healthy. As Tommy always says in our chat, health and wealth to all. So I'm going to steal that line. All right, Tuto, awesome, man. I'm pumped. Vibes are high. All right, let's see. So Danny says he was referring to John Mara's comment when asked about Daniel Jones' performance against Vikings. He said, gratifying. I always thought it was a tell that he was to blame for drafting Jones. So you're talking about the Vikings playoff game and him saying gratifying. Yeah, but listen, Dave Gettleman, when he was here, Dave Gettleman was a Giants lifer for the most part, who then went to Carolina and was kind of waiting his turn to be the general manager here. It was somebody who was friends with and learned from Ernie Accorsi, and Ernie Accorsi, one of John Mara's most trusted advisors and former general managers. And so that was, Dave Gettleman taking Daniel Jones is John Mara and the Giants and Dave Gettleman, right? That's them believing as an organization in Daniel Jones, right? It's all tied up in one. So if Dave Gettleman was making a pick, yes, John Mara was on board with it, if not behind it. But that was Dave's pick. But I'm just saying he's an extension of the old Giants guard, if you will. Dave says going to go make an Ice to State 98 to perk up for the live stream. Well done. Dave G says get those likes up. Thank you for saying that, Dave. Really appreciate that. Please hit the like button while we are live.
Dave says Gettleman was so hot for Jones because of the David Cutcliffe connection. He had the Manning brothers, but look at the rest of his quarterbacks he put in the NFL. Heath Schuler, Eric Ainge, T. Martin. Steven says, Pat, off topic, but can you remember what you thought the Giants should do when they had the second pick, Barkley, either before the draft or right after? Curious because we'll probably never see a running back picked number 2 again. Yes, Steven, I do remember in that 2018 NFL draft, the Giants were the one thing that stood out the most in that draft was that Dave Gettleman said out loud to us in a press conference that he told, even though other teams were calling him, he told his people, his scouts, his team to not answer the phone and not take those calls when they were on the clock at number 2, because he already knew they were turning the card in for Saquon Barkley. And I remember going into that draft and at that time feeling like what the Giants should do was pick up the phone from the Denver Broncos at number 5, for example. That was a team that was calling. And you remember, of course, earlier on before the draft, there was the Jets trade up to 3 with the Indianapolis Colts to move up there and take Sam Darnold. But I thought what the Giants were poised to do and should have done was try to acquire more assets for their rebuild, move back a few slots, and take a Quentin Nelson at guard. I know Bradley Chubb was a player they also liked in that draft. What I wanted them to do was move back and take Nelson. At the time, I had no concept of knowing how good Josh Allen was going to be. Most people didn't. Some people did. Some people were high on him. I remember Phil Simms saying, like, Phil Simms was calling it from day one. Like, this guy's going to be the guy. This guy's going to be the dude. But, a lot of people were unsure about a prospect like that. So, I'm always of the opinion, if there's a quarterback that you like, take him. And I do remember during that process meeting Josh Allen and feeling like not only did I like him as just a guy and as somebody who felt like was relatable and could, would take coaching well, but also he and Pat Shurmur seemed to really hit it off. And talking to them about their meeting and what they were doing, the work they were doing on the board in Indianapolis at the combine, things like that. So I also remember Josh Rosen being a big sell during that process. I even wrote a story on him, and there was a lot of hype about him, but there were a lot of flags about, be careful here. Might not be all in, might not be the right investment. Of course, Arizona found that out the hard way. But my preference for that draft for the Giants was move back and take Quentin Nelson, knowing how they felt about their team and knowing that you have to remember too, I didn't at that time agree with Eli Manning continuing to run it back. I felt like he had lost a step, and obviously Eli admitted at the end after he retired that he had down the stretch of his career. But knowing that the Giants were not going to move on from Eli as well was connected to what they should do in the draft. You could see that they were looking at a position player and not at a quarterback. So that narrowed it down to, okay, are they going to take a Saquon Barkley, or are they going to take a Bradley Chubb to help their defense? Are they going to take a Quentin Nelson on offense? What I thought they should have done was taken those calls. I mean, I think it's just malpractice to this day for Dave Gettleman not to take those calls. They should have taken the calls, moved back, and taken Quentin Nelson. That was what I had them doing, wanted them to do. Of course, they tried to hit the home run with Saquon Barkley there. They overestimated what Eli could be, what the team could be. They thought they were ready for that finishing piece. They were not. OG says, what's good, Pat? Sick of hearing Daniel Jones' name. Hasn't played well enough since his rookie year. Only reason they made the playoffs in 2022 was because of Barkley. Dave says no excuses for anyone in this regime. You nailed it. Last night, Pat, they have no organizational identity. Dave G, good to see you. What's going on? Let's see. Jim Osborne says, as perhaps the longest tenured fan here, 1963 YA Tittle, you are absolutely correct. Rotten ownership and management. Total team failure, says S. Thompson. O-line, defensive interior, running back and the quarterback. What a bad game. It was really tough to watch, no doubt about it. D-Kid, don't forget to DM me on Instagram with your address for me to send that Estate 98, getting that trivia question right. Well done. Shay says, how do we know Jones wasn't paid $40 million a year to be this bad all this time? I mean, no one can look as horrible as he looked. Shay, that would be quite the twist. I think that it's hard to separate as well when we talk about Jones and his ability and how rough it's been. You know, as much as Joe Schoen clearly has been aiming to replace him, and I told you guys, and this is true, like when Shane and Dable came in here, you know, the plan was ride it out a little bit with Daniel and then move on. And then this re-signing him to that contract was the unexpected part of it, the unexpected development, the thing that kind of changed the course of where everything was going. And because they signed him to that, yes, did Joe Schoen give himself an out after 2 years? He did, right? And that was by design, clearly. And listen, if you build the team the right way, that can end up being good work if you actually have a solid foundation to move into the future with. But you also tie yourself to the quarterback Daniel Jones that way by doing that. You are paying him $40 million a year. So you're not just paying him $40 million to make your owner happy. You're judging that you did work enough with that quarterback to get a team to the playoffs. Here we go, right? Jay Moss says, what's the feeling around the Giants front office after yesterday's embarrassment? Well, they obviously had to scramble for a punt returner, and this is something I told you guys coming out of training camp that they were looking for. They were kind of scouring the NFL world for punt return help. Of course, that, you know, is an issue right away in week 1 because they don't have it resolved with injuries and personnel issues there. The feeling, though, it's one of, listen, there's confidence in there that they're doing the right thing for the long term of their organization. But I think there's definitely nervousness right now and tightness going on there about, well, how do we get there? Because this is a bad product on the field and it's less than ideal, but it's worse than that, right? Like, this is not a, hey, let's get us to the end of the tunnel. I can see the light, even though we're still in the darkness, right? It's hard to see through the tunnel to the end, to where it opens up and where this full picture comes into view. You know, it's hard to see because when you walk into the locker room after the game and you see how, you see Kayvon Thibodeau bristling at questions just about, isn't the pass rush supposed to carry this team, and aren't expectations high for you guys, and not performing in week 1. You see Brian Burns looked to me like a little chippy there, in the locker room. I mean, he was accountable to everything, but he was asked about the boos and he said, I didn't hear that. I thought that was strange. Dexter Lawrence bristling and asked about, did he hear the boos? And listen, defensively, of course, it's very frustrating that, listen, they didn't play great either, even though they first forced 2 turnovers. But it is frustrating being on a team and in an organization where every year you wake up and it's the same old thing where you can't score any points, All right, let's see. Steven says, I say play Daniel Jones, see if he can get any type of footing post-injury. He's part of it, but the whole team has blame. If he still stinks, then we'd be in a position for a quarterback. Mike says that, can the Giants fire Shane and hire a new GM now or after they lose to Washington? Might be a good move to placate fans. He's incapable of evaluating O-line or D-line talent. Mike, that is not the Giants' style. They prefer not to make in-season changes to anything. The last time, of course, that they fired somebody in season was Jerry Reese, and that happened the day after they benched the organization, with John Mara signing off, benched Eli Manning for that game against the Raiders with Geno Smith starting out in Oakland. They typically prefer to ride it out and then turn everything over once the season is over. I do think this year, if it continues on this track, though, I don't think Brian Daboll would finish the season as the head coach. It has to get dramatically better here for him to finish the season as the head coach. Like if you lose to Washington this week, then if they lose to Washington this week, I don't even know if Brian Daboll makes it to the bye week. That would be something to be seen. As far as Joe Shane, that's a good question. I mean, you don't want to rip up your whole scouting operation, especially when you've turned it over. The infrastructure is now what Joe Shane is running, what his operation is running, what everybody there is, working together as a unit out on the road trips planned, scouting trips, conversations, and the board being built, right? All that. I think that you do, though, from my perspective and my experience now, because I've been through too many of these types of searches and conversations with the Giants, as the 49ers just appear to continue to roll against the Jets here, man. They're tough. So what happens in the NFL is feelers start getting put out by organizations earlier than you would imagine about what candidates are out there, who might come available, who might be a surprise availability on the executive or the coaching market, and also kind of laying groundwork for what those matches might end up being. So that does happen in the NFL. That it would be more like that, kind of laying groundwork for what it would look like down the road. And I know a lot of people were asking me yesterday about who would our new GM and head coach be. We batted around a bunch of ideas about head coaches and also about the teams that you would look at for GM candidates, right? Not the GMs themselves, but the lieutenants of top teams in the NFL. A general manager candidate, though, that I would take a run at, and I don't know if you'd be able to get him out of there, of course, but I would take a run at Will McClay from Dallas. I think Will McClay's work in Dallas is not discussed enough because Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, the Jones family. Of course, Jerry's talking to the media all the time. He's the face of the franchise. Even if Will McClay is running the draft, it always looks to everybody like the Joneses are running absolutely everything. And they are involved, of course, but I think Will McClay is smart, is savvy. I think the Cowboys are one of the most talented teams in the league because of Will McClay. And I would take a run at him. That's one name on the GM circuit that jumps out to me. I mean, he's essentially the de facto GM in Dallas, so if Dallas continues to succeed, there's obviously not necessarily any reason for him to leave, being paid well, being compensated well, and working for quote unquote America's team. But I would still at least investigate because I have a high opinion of the work he does. Richard Ryan says Kyle McCord from Syracuse is looking pretty good. Interesting. Yeah, I haven't watched much of him, Richard, but I'll get him on my radar too. Let's see. Mo says, Pat, long time, first time. All right, Mo. Great to hear. If you know Giants like I do from 86, Daniel Jones reminds me of a quarterback we had in the 90s called Dave Brown. Yes, he does. And another fan brought that up last night during our Talkin Ball post-game live, which is actually something, Mo, I'm sure you know as a long time, first time. But for those who don't know, we do post-game lives after every Giants home and road game from the press box at the stadium. So I'll be at every Giants game, and we do a post-game live from the stadium press box where I come right out of the locker room. I finish my work for the Daily News, and then I go live with you all on YouTube, PL and NFL, on the Believe Network to discuss the Giants and bring all the information right to you after the game. Really unique stuff that we're doing here. No one really doing anything like it. But Mo, back to your point, I think you're absolutely right. And I think what you're pointing to too is just an element of selecting a QB who the organization feels has the traits and the ability to handle the market and the spotlight and the team. And it's a case where the Giants are judging one thing, but your eyes are telling you another about what the talent is going to do for your organization and whether you need to move on or not. Right. So I do think that's a good analogy. 2K says, did we find out why there were 51 on the roster? What's going on with punt returner? Yeah. So like we said, they signed one. Why there were 51? Don't know exactly yet. I think it had to do with financials. I think, when you get players on the team, and this, I don't love this stuff. So that's why I want to confirm it before I say anything really, but you can end up as a team being in a position where you move guys off an active roster early and then add them to the practice squad and bring them back so that they're not on the roster for, let's say, the first 3 weeks of a year to lock in a certain part of their contract or their accrued seasons, things like that, to go on your salary cap. There are mechanisms where player contracts vest or don't vest depending on how often or how frequently or how much they're on your active roster. So I think it has to do with some kind of juggling like that, but I need to get to the bottom of that because I don't quite understand it. I also think you got to be careful with that stuff. You don't want to flirt with it so much that agents and players are looking at you like, what's going on here, right? OG says Daniel holds the ball because he can't see what's happening. Dave Z says he sees it, but he can't process it. Jim says, Pat, as Bernie said this morning on your show, or as Benny, right? As Benny Fowler said this morning on your show, and thanks for watching that, Jim, at the First Down with Benny Fowler. I thought that was a really fun show. The key to the quarterback is accuracy and ability to lead the receiver for yards after the catch. Who fits the bill in 2025? You know, Jim, Quinn Ewers stood out to me in that Michigan game, big time in that, in the way that you just described. This is a guy who was playing confidently, felt like he was making the right reads, the right throws, looked accurate. I think Dart and Beck, both guys who show the ability to lead their receivers and be accurate with the football as well. So those are 3 that stand out to me there: Ewers, Beck, and Dart. Looks like the San Francisco 49ers up 23-7 just picked off Aaron Rodgers in the middle of the third quarter. So looking like a rough visit to Northern California for the Jets here. But Jim, that's a really good point. And yeah, Benny was actually speaking about CJ Stroud specifically in terms of what was impressing him around the league in week 1, saying that he was leading his receivers, giving them a chance to make the play after the catch. And Benny, somebody who won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning, played on several NFL teams, including the Giants, with Eli Manning and also Daniel Jones. Benny Fowler, somebody who was able to say from his own personal experience as a receiver what you like and don't like about quarterbacks and how they throw you the football. D Kit checks in with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, D Kit. He says it's time for all the Mara player personnel guys to go, all of them. There is something seriously wrong there. They are definitely part of the problem. FYI, McCord is not good. Oh, interesting. Okay. So you have a different opinion on McCord. That's fair. I have to watch that player myself. Let's see. Thank you, D-Kit. Thank you so much for that super chat there. Really appreciate it. And actually, to your point, D-Kit, on the drafts and on the personnel, like, I think one thing that sticks out to me when I watch the Giants on Sunday, and I watch the Giants as a foundational building block organization, right? Like, if you're the Giants right now and you're saying we want to be good now, but our main priority is being good down the road. Now let's evaluate that, right? Let's evaluate, are the Giants setting themselves up well to be good down the road? And I think when you look at their drafts under Joe Shane, right? Darian Beaver's gone, Marcus McKeithen gone, late round picks in that draft, McFadden, Davidson. At the top of that draft, Kayvon Thibodeau, disappointing, really some worrisome concerns right now. Sometimes scouting reports are right. Right now, Kayvon Thibodeau, I think, needs to put his head down and play, prioritize team first and production there. Of course, he wants to produce, but you can't have and I know, listen, that investment in Brian Burns was not just about getting another pass rusher. It was about, you drafted a pass rusher number 5 overall, and Kayvon Thibodeau in New York has not turned out to be Aiden Hutchinson in Detroit, who was the number 2 overall pick in that same draft, right? They don't even belong in the same conversation right now, despite the sacks that he racked up last year. So that's a player who's underperforming, a number 5 overall pick. Evan Neal not even playing for them right now, even though he's standing there on the sideline. Wan'Dale Robinson, more of a gadget player on offense. Josh Azudu, an offensive lineman who hasn't been able to contribute at any kind of significant level. Cordell Flott, a corner you're still waiting to be the guy. Daniel Bellinger, 4th-round pick in that first draft, now reduced to the 3rd most snaps at tight end in this game, only below 30% of the snaps in the Giants' first game. Theo Johnson, the rookie, getting the bulk with Chris Manhertz coming in between them. And Dane Belton, no longer as the starting safety. They draft Tyler Nubin over him. And by no longer the starting safety, I mean that he was playing that early in camp, but not able to protect that job. And then last year, Deontay Banks, John Michael Schmitz, Jalen Hyatt, Eric Gray, Trey Hawkins, Jordan Riley, Javarius Owens. Owens and Hawkins inactive. Riley barely played. Gray got a little bit of run, not much. Jalen Hyatt only 16 snaps, had a drop. A guy who has been marginalized, remains marginalized, even though they were trying to see if he could grab a spot there in the lineup during camp. Wasn't going to happen. He was not going to outplay Darius Slayton. And John Michael Schmitz, the center, want to see continued improvement from him. Deontay Banks at corner, of course, somebody that needs to continue to grow, has a lot on his plate. Justin Jefferson, a tough assignment, beats him one-on-one on 4th down in the red zone for a big touchdown, also gets over top of him for a big play on Sunday. And not really a player suited to zone defenses, but that's a lot of what Shane Bowen was throwing on the field. So not sure if that's a good fit or a foundational piece for what they are running now on defense necessarily. And then, of course, you have the rookies. So you have Malik Neighbors. Looks like a good building block, but you need to see him to get in the end zone. Tyler Nubin. I like Tyler Nubin a lot. I do think he has a good chance to be a good foundational piece. Drew Phillips. So Nubin being the safety. Drew Phillips in the 3rd round, slot corner. We'll see. Did force a fumble. I think he's still nursing an ankle back to full strength. Nubin, of course, in the 2nd round, they wanted a corner above him there, but they traded that high 2nd round pick for Brian Burns. So it would have been nice to get a corner and a safety there, but they weren't able to do that. Drew Phillips also really largely a slot, and that's what he is. Theo Johnson, not a great debut, though he did play a lot of snaps. And then Tyrone Tracy. I like Tyrone Tracy. I think he's a good player. I think he looks like he could be something, but of course, still a limited in the game plan, possible building block there. And then Darius Muasau, 6th round pick out of UCLA, held his own as far as being in the lineup and making some contributions, even though it was unexpected that he was, let's say as of 2 weeks ago, it was unexpected that he was going to play as much as he did in this game. So that's, encouraging, but you want to see more, right? Encouraging, you want to see more with Muasau. That's what I would say. But obviously kind of beat expectations in his first game for sure. Lou Mateo, what's up with the Chad Powers icon? Nice. Lou Mateo says, as a reporter, what's the point of asking Daboll questions when he gives the same answer? Well, Lou, when there are questions that need to be asked, especially pressing questions about major issues going on with a team or a player or a coach or whatever, you need to ask the questions because you never know when the person's going to actually answer it. Like you need, it's their prerogative as the person you're talking to and interviewing to give you whatever answer they want, including a no comment. But it's my job as a reporter to ask the questions that I feel are going to provide the clarity necessary to tell the story most accurately, right? So in a game like that, asking Brian Daboll how he was thinking about his quarterback, how he was handling his quarterback, asking Daboll about, what are the fans supposed to think, right? Like those are all questions that even if the coach is going to give kind of bland non-answers to, that they do deserve to be asked because you're trying to help get the coach's help put your finger on the pulse of what exactly is going wrong, including, for example, Lou, to your point, if a fan says to me on here, why did the Giants run so much heavy personnel in at the start of that game offensively against the Vikings. If I ask Daboll that question myself and he says, we thought it was best, and that was it, and he gives a non-answer, gives the same answer, that doesn't make my question a bad question. That means that he doesn't want to answer it. You know what I mean? Sometimes they don't want to answer it because they feel like it's a competitive disadvantage if they're showing their opponent something. Sometimes they're not in the mood, right? Like whatever, but that doesn't make that a bad question. And actually somebody did ask that question today, and he essentially said that he was anticipating a lot of pressure from Brian Flores's defense. So really, again, confirmation, outsmarted and outcoached by Brian Flores there. D Kit says, Pat, it's not only Shane. I get it. He's terrible, but the Mara guys have been picking guys with Gettleman for over a decade. They need to get out. Yeah, well, he owns the team though, so barring selling the team, that's not going to happen. But I hear what you're saying; it goes above them, and that was something, to be honest with you, that over the last several years we've hit on a lot. Is the fabric of the organization is part of the problem. It's not just the people they keep hiring, right? I will say they seem to not hire the right people as well. That seems to be a part of the problem in a lot of the scenarios for the Giants and for their leadership and ownership. So I do think that's part of it. Maybe not just them and their talent evaluations, but then their evaluations of who they're hiring. Like, I have to be honest with you. Some of the things and the ways that Joe Schoen was talking and operating in Hard Knocks, it made me stunned that he did a 4-hour interview with them and they hired him. Like I'm listening to that and I was thinking, this guy sounds like he knows a lot about, scouting players and about talent and about, he does have, like an idea of the way he sees the game. But, what is his governing philosophy? How does he make decisions? How does he, let's say, not necessarily just delegate, but how does he gather everybody's opinion and take it all in to make a decision? Is he somebody who's inclusive in that respect, who takes the advice even when it's not what he necessarily wanted to hear? Like, I think there were just a lot of elements of that where I said, listen, Joe Schoen's a climber who's trying to become a general manager in a cutthroat business, and it's the Giants ownership's job to sit there in an interview and say, okay, like I like this and that, but I'm not quite sure this guy's ready. Right. So that's their job as well. All right, let's get back into the queue here. All right, let's see. Thanks for the super chat there, D-Kit. All right, Kyler with a super chat. Thank you, Kyler. Kyler says, Daboll and Joe have done several questionable things. What's the most questionable thing each has done in your eyes and each of their biggest questions still? Good question, Kyler. So to me, are you talking about this season or are you talking about in general? I think you mean in general. I would say the most questionable thing Daboll has done is his mismanagement of the staff and of game days and including the lack of composure on the sidelines that resulted in pushing the defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, out the door. Martindale not wanting to work here anymore and resigning from the Giants organization. I think that is going to continue to rear its head as the season goes. Like the issues that you saw from the defense against Sam Darnold and in the running game against Minnesota in that first game there against the Vikings in MetLife Stadium. I think those things are going to continue. I think those are inherent problems that we saw during training camp and with the scheme and the lack of answers that they have in this new defense. I know Shane Bowen's going to be working to address it and fix it. I know the Giants are going to be trying to stop the bleeding as they go into Washington to face Jaden Daniels and the Cliff Kingsbury offense and the Washington Commanders with Dan Quinn running the defense there. But I think the most questionable thing from Daboll's end has been just the mismanagement of the staff that essentially resulted in his best assistant coach and his best coordinator and really the best coach on the staff leaving. Like Wink Martindale gave them an advantage on game days. And now they do not have that X's and O's advantage At least based on week one, they didn't have it on either side of the ball. As far as Joe Schoen, most questionable, I think most questionable would be, re-signing Daniel to that contract is one, and how he handled the Saquon Barkley situation, and also drafting Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, 5 and 7 there. You could have made a trade up maybe to go get Sauce Gardner. There were other tackles that you could have taken there, Charles Cross, for example. I think that draft right there at the top, that first draft, though, not just letting Saquon Barkley walk, it was also just the way it was handled, the way that it got contentious and nasty the previous year before this year when Saquon walked to Philadelphia. I think that's the most questionable, is kind of like the bad first draft, or what looks like a bad first draft. And, in addition to re-signing Daniel and then also the mismanagement of the Saquon situation. The other thing on a big picture level for both of them, but, I guess this is more of a Shane thing, but the other thing for both of them is they seem to understand coming in. I've said this before. I think I said it earlier. They knew what the Giants were and weren't. At least it seemed like they knew, and they understood the lay of the land. They knew what what the ownership dynamic was. They also knew the franchise's history of kind of getting in its own way. They knew where the roster stood. They knew that they were limited as a team, and they knew there was going to be kind of a long road ahead of them. When they won that first year, when they didn't expect to win, I think another most questionable thing you can put pretty high on the list is they went into the next season in 2023 making decisions and acquisitions and additions and decisions based on thinking, okay, we just accelerated this a little bit. We can do this. Let's go do this. We can win. And, as Sterling Shepard revealed in that one press conference, like Brian Daboll was talking about the Super Bowl behind the scenes. Dexter Lawrence was saying, I'm done building. It's time to win. Things like that. Misunderstanding and misevaluating where they were. That is something that organizationally the Giants do consistently, is they don't accurately address and understand who they are and who they are not. And as I discussed this about Shane and Daboll, Aaron Rodgers just looked like Allen Lazard for a touchdown. Nice throw to Allen Lazard. They went for 2, did not get it. They come up short on a Breece Hall run, it looks like. So looks like 27-13 San Francisco. And the 49ers still in control, but the Jets go into double digits, 26-13 Niners late in the third quarter. And so the Jets now officially in double digits, which means the Giants now are the only NFL team officially that only scored a single-digit points in week one. All right, let me try to get through this queue here. You guys have been great, though, supplying these questions and these super chats. Thank you so much. And Kyler, actually, to answer the final part of your question, you said, what are each of their biggest questions still, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? I think Shane's biggest question right now is, are his draft picks going to pan out? Like what we just went over. I think the biggest question is, he came in and said, let's build through the draft and supplement through free agency. I actually think it's been the other way around how he's gone about it. He tried to acquire and has acquired some higher end talent at some key positions, but he's waiting for his draft picks to kind of fill in the gaps, and they're not. He's even had to sign veterans like Greg Van Roten at the start of training camp, like bringing back Adoree Jackson when it wasn't in the cards to have Adoree here at all, right? So those are at positions where he's drafted a corner, where he's drafted offensive linemen, and where those players haven't worked out. So he's have to sign free agents over them. So I think the biggest question with Joe Schoen is just that talent evaluation and team building aspect. Like when I talked to Benny Fowler in that interview today, one of the points he made about the Giants, and he said, everybody's job is on the line. Everybody's got to be on job watch right now. One of the things he said, though, is he said the Giants roster construction is just horrible, and it's been horrible since even when I was there in terms of the way the roster's set up. Offensive line, D-line, and skill players, none of the pieces fit. None of them are complementary, and it's tough to watch. It's just not good football. So that was a guy who's on the team saying that, and this is something that you hear Mike Lombardi, the former GM, says it, and I've heard several other people say it around the NFL, is that the Giants and like some of the other teams that struggle, sometimes they have some talent on their team, but they're more of a team that acquires talent than that builds a team with a philosophy and an identity. So that's kind of what we were talking about a little bit last night at the post-game live as well. 2K Quest says, does Daniel Jones have any freedom to audible out of a bad look? The telegraph screen pass for pick six should have been killed before the snap. I know Dable typically gives, Daniel Jones has the ability to, yes, read the field and change the play. Yes, he does. He also, like Dable will give him 2 plays in the headset, and, there could be an automatic kill on the first one based on a look to go to the second one, right? So Daniel does have the ability, yes. And he's been in the league long enough where it would be ridiculous if he didn't, right? So good point there, 2K. Mark Sullivan with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Mark. Mark says the Giants should have tanked last year like I recommended. Hopefully we learned. With what we gave up for Burns and his salary, we could have re-signed McKinney, Saquon, drafted McKinstry, and signed Huff. Mark, really good point there. Really good point. Additionally, why it's so concerning to see those edge rushers not performing there, right? Kayvon Thibodeau, 1 quarterback hit, no tackles, no sacks. Brian Burns, 4 tackles, no sacks, no quarterback hits. You make a good point there, Mark. Well, you bring up an interesting conversation piece there, which is like right now, the Giants, the only silver lining right now to what we're watching on the field, if it doesn't turn around, is, hey, maybe the Giants have a high pick next year again, right? And maybe they can get their quarterback there. But can you live through that? Like, that's the question, is can this regime survive that? How does the organization get there? Can ownership get to a point where they have a top 5 pick next year and they're picking at the top of the draft next year, but they still have faith in the people building and running their team? It's a really tricky dynamic. I wonder what you guys think. Dan Mazzina, the great Mandini, says, I'm all about strength and conditioning, but what about the mental preparation? After that beating, do the Giants have a sports psychologist on staff to get their heads right? That's a good question, Dan. Yes, they do. They do have somebody on staff to help players with their mental approach to the ups and downs. It could be to their performance successes or failures. It could also be to facing criticism. And they do have people on staff and somebody on staff that that players see, that it's like open door type stuff. And they do work with players in that area. Now, specific to Daniel Jones and the conversation about him having the yips, or looking like he has the yips, and looking like he was just indecisive, not seeing things clearly. And even though we know necessarily there are times where maybe he's not seeing the field as well, and a lot of quarterbacks aren't, that it was almost worse as that game went on. I think personally, Dan, there's something about, I disagree with people who say, oh, can a guy handle the New York market and the New York media? I actually don't think New York is harder than I think there's other markets that are tougher. I think Boston, I think Philadelphia, the Northeast in general, I think it can be pressure cookers in general, but some of even these smaller markets can be really, they're bubbles. Like when I was at University of Notre Dame, it's a bubble, like a national brand, but it is a bubble, in like a small town in Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, Northern Indiana. But it can feel like that's your whole world, and being criticized in that world is what it's all about, and it can get to you. But that's my point, is like, I think it's only as big as you make it. And I think you bring up a good point, which is like, if you can't manage that and you're not managing that well, you do have to actually work at it, or else it's going to continue to get to you. Like Evan Ingram, I thought was a good example of somebody who at first, was embraced New York. And then, as New York started to reject him, you could see it really affecting him, how he was behaving, how he was handling it, how he was communicating, how he was playing. Like it was bleeding into everything about him. And then you saw him, he was trying to manage a lot of that, but then you saw him sign in Jacksonville, go to Florida, and essentially like a weight lifted off of his shoulders. Somebody who, because of the circumstances, it got to him a certain way, and then he addressed it and moved on, and now is better for it. So, that's a really good question, though. Flip says doing Hard Knocks was a big mistake. It exposed them as weak and incompetent. That's pretty well said. Let's see. Yes, there's Tommy saying health and wealth to all. Appreciate you, Tommy, as always. Tommy says Giants should have paid Barkley instead they gave Dumpster Juice Jones. That's a new one. To fail 12 and 13 personnel has to be the way moving forward. Luckily, we didn't play the Cowgirls. Would have been 40-0. Jones and coaching has to go. Well, the Cowboys are on deck in week 4. Dave Z says a sports psychologist to get their heads right. I guess I'm from a different era because that is Charmin soft. Maybe have guys on the team that absolutely can't stand losing and act accordingly. Well, Dave, I don't disagree with the idea that listen, you want to add players and competitors onto your team that are going to fight to the end no matter what, right? No doubt about it, and be resilient. But that's something that at every level of sports, especially in pro sports and college sports, like high level, big money sports, that's a real thing. These guys are playing high volume amount of high pressure stake situations and snaps and reps and in games in front of, tens of thousands of people. And these guys are human. So some guys deal with depression just like you or me. Some guys have, let's say like pre-game nerves before they get out there and they actually start performing in the game, and then they can settle down, right? There's a lot of different ways that humans react to that type of stage. So I think you'd be probably surprised. I mean, I guess, I know how you're saying you're old school in that regard, but people are different. And like I said, I do think the market, the criticism, especially with social media nowadays, like I think I've said this before on this podcast, but I consider myself a pretty thick-skinned person, but there have been times in my career where the social media vitriol and criticism and nastiness has gotten to me, like really gotten to me, even though I was doing my best not to hear it, not to look at it, not to internalize it. So, we all know that that's part of what set Evan Neal off into kind of taking on the fans last year, which is something that he regretted doing and apologized for. But that's just one example of, things can get to you. NY315 Assassin says the GM needs to be gone, in my opinion. D-Kid says we can't stop the run. Pass rush was non-existent. What else? We had drops. It looked like we left our offensive game plan in the locker room. GM is a huge problem, says NY. Showtime says Shane said this is the year for Daniel. That statement is comical. Daniel has never shown talent to carry a team. Shane should have signed Barkley to keep as many good players around him as possible. I do agree with that point. I will go to my grave on that point, that if you were really doing the best thing for Daniel Jones, you find a way to keep Saquon and you draft Malik Neighbors. Dan says, Dave, I'm old school too. Unfortunately, today's player is just not the same. Jay Moss says, what's the feeling around the Giants front office? All right, we talked about that. Dave says, with Dex on the field, the run defense is better, but even with him out there, they still can't set the edge. The second he comes out, the wheels completely fall off. Yes, good points there, guys. Let's see. Tommy says, missed out on many coaches that would have made a difference because maybe Daboll is just a better OC and not a head coach. It's just gruesome to watch. That tends to happen a lot too. Like Pat Shurmur, better offensive coordinator than a head coach. Ben McAdoo, better offensive coordinator than head coach, right? Just two examples of offensive minds the Giants have brought in who they were not equipped as much as you would expect or need for the head coaching seat. Mark says, I lived through the last 13 years. Mark, thank you for another sticker and super chat there. Really appreciate it. Joe Winograd says, Pat, do you think the New York media and fans make it uniquely hard to succeed in New York? Is that possibly not necessarily the only common denominator? No, I don't think so, Joe. I mean, like I said, I think have you ever, maybe not. I mean, if you've never lived there, then it's not a reason for you to, but if you've ever like lived in, let's say, Boston or Philadelphia or, some of these other markets, like where like one loss by one of the teams that's in season or competing or contending just sets off it's like lighting a fire on your radio, basically, with talk radio um and people venting angrily and calling for jobs all the time. There's so much in those markets, I think, that even become more pressure cooker than even New York. And I know New York fans expect the best and they want the best, but my experience in New York is I feel like New York fans in general, like, let's just put it this way. I've been pretty critical of the Giants for most of my time covering the team and the organization because what I see is a lot of dysfunction or reasons why they're not succeeding, elements of their operation that need to change. And they've just done a lot of losing because of all those things while I've been there. Right. And I feel like part of the reason I bumped heads with fans early on was because I think a lot of the New York fan base, especially for a Giants team that had won 2 Super Bowls in '07 and 11 there, which was, relatively close when I got on the beat in 2016. I felt like the New York fan base was actually giving the Giants like an enormous benefit of the doubt, giving Eli Manning an enormous benefit of the doubt, giving the team, essentially like a lot of responses to the types of things and criticisms I would levy would be, this organization does things either with class or the right way, or how dare you say that, those types of things. So in other words, a lot of fans defending the organization. And so that's just me pointing out that I feel like it's not that way in all these markets. I feel like New York fans, from what I've seen, they're very loyal to the team, even to a fault, like even to the point where, like, look at the Knicks, for example. Knicks fans so loyal to an organization with bad ownership and bad management for, decades, right? Just a joke of an organization a lot of the time. And obviously now it's looking really exciting and it might end up being the most exciting team in New York here for a while now. But my point is that I feel like in New York, yes, there's a lot of attention media wise and fan wise, but I don't necessarily always think it's negative, especially coming from the fans. I feel like the fans defend their team a lot here in New York. And then, now as we sit here now on September 9th, 2024, I think what's unique about what we're seeing right now with the Giants is the New York fan base has just thrown up its hands here on this team and said, enough of this. And I actually think this is really unique how, not rashly, but how intensely and intensely disgusted the fan base is so early in a season. I think this is unique. So Joe, I think that, I do think there are individual athletes though, who they feel the attention more because they're not used to it. They've played in smaller markets. They're not accustomed to this, those types of things. You know what I mean? All right, let's see. Mo says, everybody panicking, chill out. It's September, sloppy football. We still win preseason mode. Oh my gosh, they're going to give him a fair shot. And he reminds me of 90s Dave Brown. Let's see. D-Kid says, maybe it's time to play our developmental QB. Oh yeah, we don't have one. Do people still think Neighbors is QB proof? Yeah, we will see. Small sample size so far there for him. No Met says, I remember when everyone laughed off Dan Campbell. Yeah, no, good point. Campbell is imperfect, right? He is, but the one thing he does is motivate. And the other thing he and Brad Holmes do is what? They have a team that has a defined identity. They know exactly what they are. They draft players to fit that identity, who fit into the way they want to run a team, the way they want their locker room to go, right? Like everything fits an overreaching philosophy of how to build a team and how to play football. And so, like, I could sit here, obviously, criticize like Dan Campbell, some of his decision making, the playoffs, things like that. But, to your point, leader of men, defined identity for a team, right? Guys will run through a brick wall for him. So, going to keep getting into these questions. I want to tell you guys one more time about Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code TalkinBall25 or access it through the QR code on your screen, you will get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Right now, that means a month's supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. And guys, if you want to support this channel, the best way to do it is to buy a bag of this Boom Chaga, $30 with the discount, 25% off either the code or the QR code here on your screen. And remember, subscribe and save order to do it, to use the code, but you can cancel the subscription after your first order. No harm done. I do think, though, you will love the product and you'll keep it. Also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee. Go to estate98.com/Talkin Ball to get a special buy one, get one free deal, and by Bet Online. All right. Dave G says, what's going on with Jalen Hyatt, Pat? Well, Dave, first of all, Jalen Hyatt looks like, listen, Darius Slayton in the concussion protocol now. I mean, this opens the door for, now this is your turn, Jalen Hyatt. Like, let's go. It's time to see what you got. What's happening with Hyatt is, he came out of college as a Blitnikoff Award winner, but with criticisms of his ability to run the full route tree and be somebody that they can utilize in all aspects and leave on the field, run blocking, catching balls underneath, running routes underneath, having enough of a concept and an understanding of the playbook to have that mastered so that you can be trusted in many different situations. And Hyatt, even though they have tried to give him every opportunity to win that job and to prove he is consistent and reliable in all those facets, he has not been able to prove that to them yet overall. And that's why he's not on the field consistently. He is still, at the moment, the player that it looked like the entire league adjudged him to be in that draft, which is, I don't want to use the word one trick pony, but he's a guy who goes deep well, has super speed, and can take the top off a defense. But there's nothing else in his game that profiled at the moment to people around the league that he did consistently enough to be selected above the third round. Now, I always point to that catch he made in Buffalo. Tyrod Taylor gave him a chance to make a play over the middle. He took a big hit, made a catch on a fourth down to keep that drive alive. That'll win the game. But I thought that was something that a lot of people didn't think he could do in the NFL, and he did. So he has shown flashes of those things. But Dave, the bottom line is they obviously want to see more. And I talked to Jalen Hyatt about this in the summer. And he was very adamant that it was time for him to show that he could be a dog for them, that he could be consistent. He said, I'm just trying to show the coaches I can do everything. I'm confident in myself, confident in my abilities. I feel like I can run anything I need to run. When that happens, you got to take advantage of your opportunities and make it the most of it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I did talk to him too about, last year so he had a 100-yard game against the New England Patriots, right? 5 catches for 109 yards and a win in week 12. But after that, like, I don't know if people recognize this, after that week 12 100-yard game, he had only a total of 6 catches for 43 yards in the Giants' final 5 games of the season. So that's in 5 games, had 6 total catches for 43 yards. So he was telling me in August that was a hard stretch. He said it was hard. I came off the Patriots game. It was my first 100-yard game. And then the next week was kind of hard for me to get a target. It plays with you mentally, especially for me. coming from Tennessee, getting the ball almost every play, having 1,000 yards, scoring touchdowns, it was difficult for me mentally. But I think it helped me. It helped me this offseason, prepared me, showed me what you got to do to win. It's hard in this league. And that's the first taste I got of it. And what he said, ultimately, what he needs to do is being consistent is how he stays on the field. If you're consistent, you stay on the field, he said. Getting open, catching the ball when it comes to you. When it's not coming to you, are you still winning on your routes? Are you blocking downfield? There's a lot of things the coaches want to see. So that was as clear and honest and open and helpful of an answer that you're going to get from a player. I mean, he's essentially telling you there what they're asking him to do, what they're asking him to get better at, right? So that's where we stand with Jalen Hyatt. Is he still trying to prove them right for drafting him and prove that he can do all the things they want him to do in order to keep him on the field? Elias says, Pat, if we fully clean house, do you see interim GM head coach trading guys getting capital? Who would you want to personally see in the front office head coach? Belichick? Elias, I was saying earlier, I would definitely take a stab at Will McClay in Dallas. I think he's really good at what he does. I would love to try to see if I could get him out of there. I don't know if I could, but I would definitely make the phone call. The Bill Belichick has to be, your first call as well, head coaching wise. And I think I would get right to the point. I want to know, Bill, what would it take for you to come here? I know you, like if I'm John Mara, Bill, I know you love the Giants. You always have. We love you as a Giant. This is where you built your entire legacy. The fan base would welcome you with open arms as far as embracing the history and tradition, and you would kind of tie it all together and bring us back to the promised land, elevate your legacy, try to catch Tom in the, the Super Bowl chase. You have 6, he has 7, right? He got that one with the Buccaneers. So tell us, what's it going to take? Like that would be, that I would want to know that. And I would go from there. Interim, yeah, I mean, if you fired, let's say you fired, that's a really good question. So I'm thinking about the roster and what it looks like. So if an interim head coach and GM came in late in the season, what would they do if it was a lost year? How would they operate with this roster? Yeah, I mean, I do think, that would be a situation where a guy like Slayton, if this season goes down the tubes and let's say Dable gets fired early, stuff like that, then definitely I think you're seeing a trade of Darius Slayton, for example. I mean, they have a lot of guys locked up on contracts, right? There's not a ton of veterans on this team that are like easily tradable and desirable for the short term that aren't under like a significant contract, right? Like there's Greg Van Roten, right guard. I don't think you're getting much for him in a trade. And then Jason Pinnock at safety, but Pinnock's still a relatively young player, I think, right? How old is he? Jason Pinnock. So Jay is, yeah, he's only 25. So yeah, so I mean, they don't profile with a ton of players that it's like, oh, let's offload this guy for capital. I mean, I guess you could start looking at, okay, Devin Singletary, because we have young running backs, but you can't be in a position as an organization where you're constantly getting rid of good players either. Like that's one thing that you have to be careful of. So yeah, you would sell assets. The short answer is you would sell off some assets that you could in that regard, but you don't want to clean house of all of your talent from your organization either, right? I do think though, Elias, we'll see how the leadership handles this next stretch here. But the locker room leadership of their top players, like a guy like Dexter Lawrence stands out to me. They need to start saying and doing all the right things here to kind of rein this in, keep the culture, improve the culture, make it like a strong locker room dynamic. If that doesn't happen and part of them falling off is the locker room souring and getting, let's say, if not toxic, then, full of a bunch of guys saying me and I rather than we and us, then I think that could be where you start looking at like, big name top players leadership. But, you know, we don't know if it's going to proceed that way. And then also you have to remember again, like I said, like great players don't just grow on trees. So you don't want to just get rid of good players all the time. Mark Sullivan checks in again, $5. Thank you, Mark. He says, does Giants management give you the cold shoulder when you're critical? Good question. I still have professional, productive conversations with people in the Giants management, despite being critical. I think what I find, Mark, is that yes, there are people who are extremely sensitive in the NFL, in different organizations, in the league, NFLPA, players, whatever. There are also some people who don't like to engage at all. But there are also a group of people around the league and around football, college football, agents, etc. There are people who understand that you have a job and they appreciate that they have a job. And so if everybody knows the drill, right? Like they know, for example, like there could, let's just say there's somebody who works in the Giants front office right now and they don't love that I'm critical of their team and they want to win, but they also know that their team's not playing well and they played poorly in the first week and that, none of the things I'm saying when I'm being critical are wrong or unfair. Now, if you say things that are unfair, right? Like let's say if you just make like a broad strokes generalized assumption or statement about something that is wrong, and then you criticize the team for that, that is something that justifiably someone from the team might call you on or text you on or give you a cold shoulder on and say, how can you say that? Like that's not accurate. Or how can you say that? That's not indicative of who we are. Or, that's not true because this is actually what happened in that situation. Right. So that happens, but I think also like there are, in that situation, for example, if it comes back to me and if I was in the wrong, someone who rushed to judgment or said something unfair about somebody, then I have to understand that the reality of the situation, the lay of the land, and know they have a job and I have a job, and that it does matter that you're fair to them, and that, in those situations, either saying I'm wrong or correcting it or both. But yeah, again, just like I said about the New York market and how people handle it differently and feel it differently, there are different ways people, like say GMs or coaches or executives or scouts or whoever, there are different ways that they take it. Like some people take it personally, some people don't. Some people respect what you do, some people don't. Some people try to control you as a reporter and as a media member, or they just write you off because they assume because you don't help them that you're critical and that therefore you're an enemy, right? Some people view you as an ally, some people view you as a resource. As long as you have the respect element between each other, then you can work together. Joe Winograd checks in with a big 20 spot. Joe, thank you so much. Joe says, I'm a third generation Giants fan. Grandpa listened to them on the radio back in the day. Glad you're listening to how us diehards feel. I feel the Giants have lost their way completely, and I don't think they know why it's broken. It's sad. Yeah, Joe, you hit it right on the head there. I think this is where a lot of fans are right now, which is it just really isn't obvious where it goes from here. And that's why I titled our conversation, Where the Giants Go From Here, because I want to try to help you guys see it, try to help you guys understand it. And for me, the first step is, as always, an autopsy from the top down, including ownership of how they make decisions. So that includes their hiring practices and processes of general managers and head coaches. I think they need to do that differently. I think they need to, even though they have embraced doing a lot of parts of their operation differently by going and hiring, like say outside the family with Joe Shane, for example, and giving him, power and independence in his decision-making and his operations. I think that the Giants really need to, this is an inexact thing, Joe, but why do they not adequately adjudge who and what they are. Like that is something that I mentioned this earlier. Why do they struggle understanding where they sit and where they stand in the structure and in the ladder, the 1 through 32 of the NFL? You know, it doesn't mean you know exactly, okay, we're the 20th best team going in and we know that, right? But you should know, like, at certain positions, instead of, let's say, trying to convince yourself your line is fixed, or trying to convince yourself your quarterback's good enough when he's not, or these types of decisions where they fall in love with their own players, they fall in love with their own picks, they um, they become overly enamored with elements of their own process, and they don't want to abandon all the work and trust they put into that process. And I understand that to an extent, but you have to understand that, you know, like, it doesn't take long, I guess, from my vantage point. It doesn't take long to, let's say, you know, you walk on the practice field against the Jets and you see, so the Jets right now are getting beaten pretty thoroughly by the San Francisco 49ers. You walk on, it's only one practice day, I know, but you can see a difference in the way the players are moving and their size and their ability at certain positions. Same with the Detroit Lions practices, right? Even though the Giants made some good plays and held their own at times at certain spots, you can still see a difference in the team's ability and the team's attitudes and the way that they're practicing differently. Like, it stands out. And as the Giants, as an organization, as a team, you need to be not only assessing that and watching that and evaluating that, you also need to be um, correcting yourself and improving yourself by having the correct takeaways from those situations, you know? So be honest with yourself when you practice against or play against a certain team. Like, for example, the Houston Texans preseason game. You know, I find it very hard to believe that they came out of that game and didn't know that they were going to be a really bad team. Like, I think they knew that this team was going to be, you know, I think it would be impossible for them to look at this roster and be competent and think that they were going to be really good this year. That's what I think. Let's see. Tommy says Quinn Ewers has to be the pick. UT Hook'em Horns, Texas Gunslinger is the key to the Giants' future. Please, John Mara, make the move. Focus on getting Ewers in the draft, and Bill Belichick come back home to get the Giants right. Mike Egan says, which quarterback will be the first to throw for 500 yards this season? Wow. That's a good question. Well, it's probably going to be a quarterback whose team is down. So let's see. I'll go with 500 yards. If someone throws for 500 yards this season, I'll say it's Trevor Lawrence. That's what I'll go with. Trevor Lawrence. OG says the season is over already, Pat. I'm calling it now. Let's see. Jim Osborne says Tommy Cutlets couldn't beat out Tim Tebow. Socrates says, question, just curious, what was or is holding Drew Lock back from taking the job away from Daniel Jones? I liked him when he came out in the draft and when he played at Seattle last year. Yeah, didn't have a special camp. Got a lot of, obviously, all the snaps with the ones in the spring. He does now have enough of a command of the offense because of all his work with the ones in the spring, and also worked enough with those guys to have some chemistry there. But unfortunately, recently, he has not been getting those snaps, and he had the oblique injury, obviously, because wasn't protected well by the line in the preseason. So that was part of it as well. He was injured, Socrates, during the second half of camp there. And so Daboll saying he's capable now and he's healthy enough to play now. But really, Socrates, there were, when Daniel Jones was struggling at times in camp, Drew Lock would step in with the twos and would not do anything to make you say, not only is Daniel Jones struggling, but Drew Lock is playing really, really well. Like, that's what happened when Tyrod Taylor was here. You remember like 3 days into my first year into the year when Tyrod was first here, 3 days into that camp, Daniel was playing really poorly and Tyrod Taylor was sizzling with the second team. And I'm sitting there like, well, this guy's better, you know? And you just that never happened with Drew Lock. Now, technically, how was he playing? I think he has shown that he throws a pretty good deep ball. But when he extends the play, he tends to be a little bit loose with it, tries to fit it in, has confidence in his ability, makes decisions. Like you saw that one interception against the Lions in the preseason game where he just threw it right to the defender. Like it'll look good, and then it'll just be like a sudden, what was that? Is kind of what we've seen so far. But he does have physical tools. He can move, the way that Darnold ran play action pretty well for the Vikings. Like I could see Drew Lock doing something like that. I could easily see him being coached by somebody like Kevin O'Connell and doing something similar to what Darnold did against the Giants. But he's being coached by Brian Daboll. He's supposed to be an offensive quarterback guru, though, so he should be making it happen, right? G-Men says, Pat, sorry for jumping in late. No problem. Yesterday's game was an absolute embarrassment. Jones is going to get Daboll fired when it's all said and done. Tough times. I'm a realist and optimist, but I see where this is going. Joshua says, where do we go from here? It feels inevitable that everyone will lose their jobs this year. Or do we enter another wacky cycle where the GM stays and we just continue to spiral? Yeah, that's a really good question, Joshua. I think I'd say this. Everything's on the table right now. Everybody getting fired is on the table. Anybody is everyone getting fired is on the table. I think Shane staying and the coach and quarterback getting fired is on the table. And then, of course, as we all hope, the turnaround is on the table, but it has to start now, right? Like I think you guys would agree. They need to beat the Browns and the Commanders and the Browns here before that Dallas game in order for anybody to have any kind of faith that this season is going to be anything worth watching. But as one of my friends in town said today, he said, at least I get my Sundays back. And yeah, Joshua, I think to be clear, though, where do we go from here is your question. I think where they go is listen, I came into this season saying they were only going to win 4 games, and I thought it was going to mean everyone was going to get fired. And so I think that's what's going to happen. I think the first game did nothing to change how I feel about the team. Coach Dave says, why did it take so long for people to see this guy was terrible? Good question. Socrates says, hey, Pat, is there anywhere we can read your work if we are not in the New York area? I would love to read your articles and takes on the Giants and other sports-related topics. Thanks, Socrates. Yeah. Are you a Daily News subscriber, Socrates? You can subscribe online, nydailynews.com. So nydailynews.com. You subscribe to the site. It is not expensive to subscribe to the Daily News website. Like you're not getting the print newspaper. You're just reading the website. It's cheap and gets you much more than just my work, but you can read all of my Giants content. Socrates, you can access that pretty easily if you just go on my X account or Twitter, PLeonardNYDN, and you'll see one of my top posts right now is my latest column on the fans kind of giving up right now on the team until they see otherwise. And you can click on that and it'll ask you to sign up. But I don't know how cheap it is right now, but you'll get a deal. That's what I could tell you. So nydailynews.com. And then you put /sports. That'll take you to the main sports page. Joshua says, can you get Daniel Jones some Boom Chaga? I should. Hey, Daniel, I got some boom for you, man. Let's go. RU Giant says, I went viral for the viral after the fake video. People don't understand how mad you get when you watch that in person and spend all that money and drinks. I was walking to the train and we see let's see. RU says, I'm guessing you saw that video of the people heckling Daniel Jones after the game. When you have to pay all that money and sit through that, you're going to be pissed. There was about 90 to 100 people there after the game. That video was mine and went everywhere. My phone was blowing up. My friends took it with us. Oh, interesting. You took that video, RU. All right. Thank you for pointing that out. Really interesting. Yeah, I like what you said too there about, you pay your hard-earned money and everything. And, like I said, I do think you guys are really like this episode, but Benny Fowler on our episode of Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard on Monday morning, that's up now on the YouTube page, PL and NFL, or on the audio for Believe Network on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Benny pointed out, like, you have to think about it. People are paying hard-earned money, and the economy is in a tough spot right now. So if I'm paying top dollar to come to MetLife Stadium to watch football with my family, find parking, walk, and then I see that type of performance, I'm going to be pissed, especially if I have to sit back in New York traffic on the way back home. So I'm with you. I'm with you there. All right. Yeah, no, I do think that was a little too far there, that the way Daniel was being treated and in that manner. But of course, the booing, there's nothing wrong with booing the way they played. They're not, and the way he played, they're not playing well enough, right? Mo says, Pat, a lot of blame should land on Dable and his play calling. There were no attempts to get the safeties worrying about the run. The play calling was abysmal. I agree with you, Mo. Also, not only not enough attempts to get the safeties worried about the run, the Giants aren't a good running offense. They can't move the line of scrimmage with their offensive line. It's a problem. Mo says also Green Bay, another player, Xavier McKinney, catching the interception we let go. Yep. Socrates says, could the whole Daniel Jones experience be making the Giants gun shy on taking a risk on a quarterback they obviously desperately need? You mean as far as like signing a free agent right now and trying to bring somebody in to fix it last minute? You know what I think? I think it's kind of like from ownership standpoint, it's probably like, hey, we signed him. This GM was a part of signing him. The coach was here. We brought him here to be an offensive expert to get it done. Wow, Tyrod Taylor in the game for the Jets right now, by the way, in garbage time here as the Jets are trailing, looks like 32-19 after a failed 2-point conversion. So the Jets are going to lose. So, to your question about whether the Giants sign a free agent, I think it's just, this was the decision we made. We were going to run it back with Daniel. You hear John Mara saying, this is what I still believe in this guy. I'm still glad we signed him to that contract. I still think he's worth that contract. And so, make it work, guys. Like that's the way I view it. And let's think about this. So in the last couple of months, we've heard John Mara say, I'm still glad that we signed him. And we've heard Joe Shane say to another GM, at least you don't have to still look for a quarterback. Interesting. Where My Entertainer says, giving $100 million to a trash quarterback is even worse than drafting a bust top 10. Somehow the Giants did both. John Moog says, Daniel didn't forge the GM signature on his contract. Exactly. Facts, John. Where My Entertainer says, he also didn't let Barkley and McKinney walk for nothing. Awful management. Socrates says, how does that work if Mara wants to get rid of Dable at the end of the year, but not Shane? With the constant turnover in the coaching and front office, what are the possibilities that Shane stays? Traditionally, the GM seat with the Giants is safer than the coaching seat. And obviously, in a lot of organizations, it happens that way too. But traditionally, the Giants try not to and do not often turn over the general manager seat and their front office. They don't like to do that. But and also, John Mara is on the record saying he does not view Joe Shane and Brian Dable as a package deal, which was a very big quote from him, because that is him saying, I could fire one and not the other, right? Once it comes down to it, that's the precursor to that potential decision and possibility, right? So, Socrates, I think it really comes down to, I do think, based on Hard Knocks and then my reporting and other things we've talked about just here, I think there seems to be an interesting, potentially touchy dynamic there between Shane and Mara. Um, I'm not sure if it's as rosy as you would think of the traditional Giants ownership and general manager relationship to be. Definitely doesn't come off that way at all. Saquon Barkley decisions, Daniel Jones decision, all that. So, you know, I think what the possibility that Shane stays, I think the way it has to look is a lot of the infrastructure of the roster needs to look better. So the draft picks need to start playing better. Guys need to start developing, and talents that he's picking, like some of his value players in the third round, right? Second rounders, let alone, we know there's been a lot of first rounders who aren't working out already, at least those first two in the first draft, Kayvon and Evan Neal, both of which you need to see more from. Neal, not even a contributor right now, number 7 overall pick. But, Shane needs some of those players to start contributing and becoming like main parts of this organization and of this team. If that doesn't happen, then that's where he loses job as well. If a lot of the team that he is building looks pretty good and encouraging for the future, youth wise, developmental wise, draft pick wise, but it's obvious that the coaching staff is not getting the most out of a really talented roster, let's say, that they interpret it that way, that's how he stays, right? But I personally don't look at the field and feel like we're going to see that come to pass. Like I said, there are some young players I like Tyrone Tracy, Tyler Nubin, guys like that. And I do think Neighbors can be a building block for a long time, but I don't think necessarily, Socrates, that you're getting in a position where I personally think if it goes bad this year, it's going bad because of a lot of different reasons, and therefore everyone gets the boot. Let's see. Tommy says, Bill Belichick, come back home, get to the Hall of Fame winning with the franchise you belong to, get this culture back to smash mouth football, dominating the trenches. It's been a black cloud over the organization. Matthew says, did Daboll have anything else to say after reviewing the tape, particularly on the lack of QB pressures on Darnold? So wasn't very helpful there. He said about the defense. So what did you think of the pass rush as a whole? And Kayvon and Brian Burns tandem was the question. And Aziz was out there too. Daboll said, I think some of the games were good. The stunts in the games we used. The pressure was really good inside with Dexter when he lined up in there. They played the game. They played it well. They were playing in favorable situations. They get up, we get down. The game's controlled a little bit. So we got to do a better job of playing complementary football, offense, defense, kicking game to make sure we can get into more of those situations. Then he said he thought Shane Bowen was prepared and did a good job. I think that's a little bit ridiculous to say that the game dictated how the defense played because, yes, they fell behind eventually, but the game started with their offense playing poorly, their defense forcing a turnover, and the offense scoring and giving them a lead. So, they took a lead right off the bat. It wasn't a touchdown, but they took a lead right off the bat. It's not like they didn't have a chance in that situation to make a difference with their pass rush, right? So, but that's what he said. I can't. The one thing that keeps getting me is the good preparation that they have, right? I thought we had a good week of preparation. Again, it's on all 11 players, the coaches, it's on me. So we'll work hard to fix that and come up with something better than we did against Washington. I mean, just horrible stuff to listen to. Alex says the issue with firing Daboll but keeping Shane is that head coach candidates can see the type of weak roster that Shane has built due to his horrible drafting. That is true. That is true. I do think someone like Lou Anarumo would be a fit if Joe Shane remained here because Anarumo and Shane are friends who work together in Miami. And Anarumo's somebody who overdue a head coaching job. So that could be somebody maybe that you would attract and who would create alignment there. But of course, the Bengals defense, has to bounce back and continue to be giving them the advantage that they have over the years. Bounce back from last year. It was not as good last year. Let's see. Eric says if the Giants offense can't crack 20 points versus the Commanders, oh boy. Indeed, oh boy. And the Commanders look like a vulnerable team playing a lot of drop zone, kind of like the Giants do. That's a team in flux, in rebuild, and with a lot of talent lacking in certain key areas. So you're absolutely right. If they keep Shane and hire a new coach, how would the new head coach feel safe of Shane's job if Shane's job is at risk the next year? Yeah, no, that's a good question. And that's, you're talking about the situation like the Pat Shurmur firing with Dave Gettleman staying when Joe Judge came in. And so that's why you don't want an arranged marriage, right? You do want alignment if you're going that way. But no, I agree with you. I think, you're putting pressure on the GM there. And listen, it's just going to be hard for them to be bad enough where they're firing the coach and not the GM this year. Because if they get that bad, this is the GM's team and roster, and he's involved in, game day usage decisions and things like that, right? Joe Shane gets one more offseason, one more draft. Let's be fair, says Eric. Okay, so fair is to you 4 seasons and 4 drafts. Where are my entertainers? Said earlier on, hit the like buttons. 35 out of 120. Let's go. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Please hit those like buttons while we are live. That helps drive engagement and tells YouTube, tells the algorithm, tells Giants and NFL fans who don't know we're here, that we are here and that we do this Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard Mondays, Thursday nights, and post-game lives after every Giants home and road game. So after this game against the Commanders this weekend, I will be down there at that dump of a stadium in a box somewhere where I can find some quiet and some peace, talking to you all about what we saw on that field in that horrendous, unwelcoming stadium from a bad angle viewpoint in the press box. Dave Z says, if I could hit the like button more than once, I would. Tommy says, please make a move for any of the quarterbacks Steelers might be better than what's going on currently with the Giants roster. Eric says, Joe Shane needs to be attending college games on Saturdays. Identify your quarterback. Eric, not sure if you missed it, but we did actually go over a bunch of the top college quarterbacks earlier with the stats and kind of outlook on Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, Carson Beck, Jackson Dart, Shedeur Sanders, and company. So definitely having those conversations. Undefined says, did Daboll complain about his quarterback while getting beat by Sam Darnold? Everyone is going to look bad when the other team severely outcoached you. There you go. No doubt. He was severely outcoached. Reclaws says, Daniel Jones has average to below average ball velocity and is hesitant to fit the ball into tight places. He is also a one-read quarterback and a ticket slow through going through progressions, and he double clutches. Yes, that's no doubt. Let's see. Scott doesn't want Shedeur Sanders. Randy says nothing is guaranteed in the draft, but wanting to draft a guy who hasn't played yet is crazy. I see you guys talking about Arch Manning, right? Like, yeah, hard to plan for deep into the future for a guy who hasn't started and played. Eric says Giants need an electric quarterback that makes plays off platform, an electric runner like Leary or Hampton. Dave says, I can see John Mara saying to whoever is the GM is to move heaven and earth for another Manning. Drew says, why didn't some key guys play? So Isaiah Simmons, to me, I said this in the preseason, that I thought that Wink Martindale not being here was going to be bad for Isaiah Simmons. There was all this conversation about, hey, look, you're going to use Isaiah Simmons in a better way. They're going to use him differently, all this stuff. But then Shane Bowen indicated that he was still figuring out early in training camp how he was going to use him at all. And I think Martindale used Simmons correctly and in a targeted way, playing him to his strengths, using him as a blitzer, covering running backs on third downs, being multiple, using that athleticism. He has ball skills as well, right? Remember the pick six to ice the game in Washington, where they will be playing now on Saturday or on Sunday this weekend in week 2. So, him not playing, Dayball was asked about that today. He said that basically their decision was because they were starting Newbin, they made Dane Belton the money backer or the extra third safety rather than using Simmons there. But to me, bringing Simmons back and then not using him is not necessarily something I would expect to go over very well, but I'm interested to see what feedback there comes from that, as we come out of week 1 and into week 2. I think, you sign a player like that, but you don't use them on defense. That's pretty confusing to me. All right. Let's see what else you're asking about. Some other key guys. Jalen Hyatt, already answered that. Needs to be more consistent. He told me that even in the summer. And then other players who did not play as much. Daniel Bellinger told you guys Theo Johnson was going to be tight end 1 and that Bellinger was falling, out of favor as far as the depth chart goes. Chris Manhertz is a guy that they trust a lot, more so even than Bellinger as a blocker. That's why Manhertz is here. And who else did not play primary guys? Micah McFadden's banged up. He has a groin injury. So for some reason, the Giants were allowed to not list him on the injury report, but he has a groin injury and he was on a pitch count, even if he did play, according to Daboll. Evan Neal, don't know. I mean, he did play in the preseason, eventually coming off that ankle. So he was available. I don't know how much the foot was limiting him. Drew Phillips, I think, only played a little bit because of the ankle as well, even though he did have the forced fumble. Ashley says, Pat, what did you think of Daboll's play calling? I thought there was no imagination. Didn't see any crossing patterns, screens, didn't see any deep balls called. Ashley, what stood out to me was that sequence near midfield where he had the 2 quarterback runs and then punted it 4th and 3 on the 49. I thought that was a give up white flag call in the second quarter there where his offense needed a spark. He showed no faith in his offense, no faith in his defense. I thought playing timid, playing not to lose, coaching not to lose, showing little confidence in your players and in your plan. I didn't like it at all. As far as the exact play calls, I mean, very clearly they're trying to get the ball down the field, max protect to get the ball down the field. They think Neighbors can be that dude, and they can, even if they don't have a ton of people running routes and even if they only have, let's say, Neighbors, Singletary, and a tight end, they think that Neighbors can beat the coverage, that he's good enough to do that. So they were trying to trust him with that. But yeah, definitely ill-conceived. I mean, you could see eventually it was like, we need Darius Slayton on the field, like to make Daniel Jones more comfortable and to get some completions here. So ill-conceived, poor job. Actually shockingly bad considering this is Daboll's best attempt to save himself, is to call good plays and call better plays and prove that he can do it better than it's been done so far with Mike Kafka. So shocking. Dave G says, congrats, bro. I'm pretty sure Dave saying that about us having such a great live post-game chat. I think over 5,500 views on post-game live on Sunday in week 1 after the Minnesota game. And that's definitely a record for Talkin Ball Live. So thrilled with that, and thankful to everybody in our community here who attended, who's watched, who's viewed it, and who continues to participate. Let's see. Illa, what's going on? Says Kayvon and Burns better learn to hold that edge, or offenses will have their way with us. They can't get caught rushing up the field on a run as much as they were yesterday. Poor awareness. Neither of those players is known for stopping the run well. Let's see. Eric says Arch Manning is a can't-miss prospect. You people complain he's not a starter. He will have one of the greatest college seasons next year. Joshua Hoke says, I also have a fear that we will lose players like Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas, who are probably sick of losing and feeling like they are wasting their talents here. Dexter Lawrence definitely comes off to me right now as cranky. Obviously, he hates to lose. I mean, he comes from Clemson where they were winning all the time when he was there. And I understand that. But Andrew also not happy yet after the game. Andrew was not happy after the game. Great guy, accountable guy, not happy. Like I asked him if he was angry, and he said, yes. It's frustrating. You only have 17 of these, and to waste an opportunity like that is really frustrating. Mr. Godfrey says, Vilma said live the Rex weren't at the spot when Daniel Jones, the receivers weren't at the spot when Daniel Jones is supposed to throw the ball on a timing route. Also that Daniel Jones doesn't have time to wait for them to get to the spot. Did you see it that way? Mr. Godfrey, I think different plays happen. There were different issues. There were times where the protection, like the offensive line, in my opinion, did not have a very good game, especially the right side of the line. So as a whole, I didn't see much pressure come from Thomas. I did feel like Runyon and Van Roten each gave up their share of pressures. And then I thought Illuminor was not good. I don't think John Michael Schmitz showed up as a huge weakness in pass pro from what I saw live, but I didn't think as a unit any of them blocked well in the running game either. So I think from my vantage point, Mr. Godfrey, there were plays where there was good protection and Daniel Jones didn't make the right play or missed a throw. There were plays where there was too much pressure because of the O-line and the blocking wasn't good enough, and that broke up the play. And I'm sure there were some plays that, the receivers didn't help him out. Like, for example, there was one third down where Daniel Jones made a throw and it kind of tipped off Wandale's hand inside, and the throw was way ahead of him and it went incomplete. Wandale Robinson, if you watch that play, sat his route down, but Daniel thought he was going to keep running. So Daniel led him with the ball, and Wandale Robinson sat down, and so then the ball went that way. So that's a miscommunication, and, Daniel expecting his receiver to do one thing into space to go get the first down, and Wandale doing another. So whose fault is it? Miscommunication, but yes, both of them. Mike says Justin Fields and Daniel Jones have comparable stats and records. Why does Fields deserve a second chance and Daniel deserves to be banished? Mike, I don't think anybody would begrudge Daniel a second chance somewhere else. I mean, I think, listen, aren't there plenty of people on here who think like Daniel Jones could go somewhere else and suddenly be a much better quarterback? I mean, don't we think that, especially given the treatment that he's getting here now and how he was essentially booed off the field in week 1. I mean, it's kind of like when Evan Ingram at the end, where the way he was being treated, it was just fans saying, get this guy out of here. I think he will have another shot, and I think he'll be better there. Fly Park says, who is worse, Carolina or the Giants? Carolina might look like a worse team, but they did score 10 points. They did score an offensive touchdown, and the Giants didn't. So I don't know. That Munich game looming large potentially for the number 1 pick. Brett M says, I wanted Josh Allen in 2018. Fact. What's up, Pat? Brett, you knew it, man. You knew it. DeIlla says Justin Fields is a far more athletic quarterback. In all honesty, there's more to work with when it comes to that kid over Jones. D-Pat says Josh Allen had a big flag at some racist posts on social media. Oh, I didn't recall that. Make Brandon Brown the GM and clean house. I don't want Joe Shane picking the next QB, says OG. Hard for me to say keep Brandon Brown and get rid of Joe Shane. Brandon Brown's been a part of all these decisions. Let's see. Matthew remembers the talk being Daniel Jones or Dwayne Haskins in 2019. That was a lot of the talk back then for sure. Let's see. Nick Bava says, Pat, please explain the implications of if Jones gets injured and the clause in his contract. Thank you and great podcast. You got it, Nick. So the injury guarantee is this. If Daniel Jones suffers like a major injury that causes him to fail his physical next March, right? So if he is not able to pass a physical next March I think it's by like the 4th or 5th day of the next league year. So that's really like right after the start of free agency. So, that would be probably, something like a torn ACL or anything else that's like a major injury that he's recovering from. If he suffers that kind of serious injury while either in a game for the Giants or on the Giants property working out, then $23 million of his $30 million scheduled salary becomes guaranteed. So none of that $30 million is guaranteed at the moment, but $23 million of it becomes guaranteed in March if he can't pass the physical. So that's where that stands. And then let's see. I think it breaks out to so let me see, 23 million. So it's Jones's. Let me refresh. There's actually there's something more specific to it that I wanted to share with you. So if he sustains an injury in a workout or practice on the premises that prevents him from passing a physical at the start of the league year in 2025, 23 million of that 30 million becomes guaranteed. Aside from the injury guarantee, 12 million of the 23 million will become guaranteed for skill and cap simply if he's on the roster on the 5th day of the league year next year as well. So in other words, if he's on the team next year on the 5th day of the 2025 league year, 12 million of his 30 million becomes guaranteed for skill and cap. So, non-injury. And then the other 11 remains an injury guarantee. But if he's injured and can't pass the physical, all 23 million of that becomes guaranteed at that point. Does that make sense? So D-Pat says, Pat, how have Drew Lock and DeVito looked to you practice preseason? Could they be better than Jones or no chance? They haven't been during all preseason. Just being honest, they have not. DeVito's been underwhelming or bad, and Locke has had some moments, but has not wowed anybody. Let's see. Have you seen a team go into a season with 51? What does that say about Shane? Very strange. Seems like a financial management thing, but hard to put my finger on why it's necessary for them, trying to get to the bottom of it. Someone tell Daboll this is a game where you throw vertically, not horizontally, definitely not behind the horizontal. Even when it worked, the dude Wandale had to go past 3 players to get anything. No doubt. Let's see. VFDVR says, Joe Judge, let's do 2 quarterback runs. Daboll, let's do 2 quarterback runs. What? Make Chris Sims a GM. Dude knows how to spot a QB. Interesting. OG points out, reminds us that Sauce Gardner said it all about Daniel Jones in his preseason interview. That's true. Mike Lowe says, I would hire Tom Coughlin as team president right now. DeIlla says, Neighbors is absolutely a building block. I have no problem with that pick from this past draft. It's the rest of the need picks I completely agree with. And yes, it was a need-based draft. Undefined says confidence by management. They can't even get the game day roster right. By the way, isn't it against league rules to hide injuries? It is. Very confused about what's going on there. Why the league isn't cracking down on that or investigating that, right? I think blowing it up is not the thing to do, Scott Young says, but Brian Daboll needs to dig deep and figure out what he needs to do his job. Brett M points out that Cooper Beebe, the rookie guard who the Giants could have taken, is starting for Dallas. If they play like this after week 4, I'm out on Shane and Meatball. Haven't heard that Meatball. Oh man, I haven't heard that nickname yet. You got me there. That caught me off guard. Mike Lowe says Daboll is not a leader of men, career assistant. A2Z Me says another late night stream. Very nice. Saw the Tyreek Hill video. Savage gang style cop behavior. Brutal. Yeah, no, that was ugly. Definitely. If you haven't watched it, really ugly. Todd Banks says Burns, 4 tackles. Darrell Taylor acquired by the Bears for a 6th-round pick. 8 tackles, including 2 for a loss, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Poles is definitely on the right track. Let's see. Benji likes Brandon Brown as well. Kyler says, what do fans have to do to get better results? Boycott, burn jerseys, just year after year of foolishness. My son is 4. Jones has done nothing since he has walked, talked, and gone to school. Let that sit. Yeah, no, really well said, Kyler. Yeah. It's become the point where this is who the Giants are, right? It used to be, oh man, proud franchise that's used to success has fallen on hard times. But now it's become this is who they are. That's the really concerning part, right? VF says it's starting to look like it's all about the quarterback in the NFL. Belichick couldn't do much without Brady. Dable can't do anything without Allen. And as much as the Texans do have a pretty good roster and are look like they have good coaching now, I mean, listen, what changed them as a team completely was the quarterback, right? A2Z Me says Hostetler wasn't super skilled athletically, but he had the spirit of a leader. I've never gotten that feeling with Jones, and he's 200% of a better athlete. Because Brett says DJ reminds me of Hostetler, not Brown. OG says they'll trade Slayton at the trading deadline. Yeah, I agree. It's headed that way for sure. Deilla says, let's not disgrace just Jeff Hostetler like this. Haas wasn't as bad a bad a player and went on to have some productive years with the Raiders. Let's see. A2Z Me says Daniel is low RAM. Jones needs to upgrade to a better motherboard. Alpha Bar says the Jets are getting cooked. Rodgers just threw a pick. That's the only good news for Mara if the Jets still stink. VF DVR says Shane to Dable on Hard Knocks. So you would say O-line is the number 1 priority. Takes Dable much prodding to say yes. What's that about? Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Well, was that when Dable had his feet up on the coffee table? I mean, so weird. Socrates says, this is the week for the ruining of my childhood. The Giants are trash and Darth Vader passed away. FML. Yeah. RIP James Earl Jones, no doubt. Let's see. Where am I? Undertaker says 90% of NFL QB success is poise and decision making. If you can't find that guy, draft a non-quarterback stud. VF says Daniel Jones gets beaten all the time behind porous O-line where we don't have as many pass rushers other than Dexter Lawrence. KT, no tackles yesterday, says Scott. Should have taken 2 O-linemen instead of Kayvon in that draft, says VF. Brett says, Pat, since everyone is pissed at Daniel Jones, who do you think he is more pissed at? Gettleman, Dable, Shane, the media, taking 5 years to get a number 1, or his O-line's getting him crushed and injured? My QB. Brett, I would say that if, listen, I'm not going to say Daniel Jones is mad at anyone, but hearing all of the chip on his shoulder talk that he's offered to us over the last few, days and weeks and months, I think he's trying to prove this front office wrong. I would say Shane, but also just the front office and the Giants operation leadership right now in general is what Daniel Jones is trying to prove wrong. Let's see. Steven says, Pat, with the unpreparedness of game day, game management follies, staff problems, the feet on the table look with meeting the owner on Hard Knocks makes Dable look worse to me. Like, what's up with this guy? I think you answered your own question there. I mean, it's not a good look. Dave Z says Tim McDonald must go as part of the Mara family that's also in the personnel decisions. VF says Barkley was not going to win us the game on Monday. Fix the O-line. Been an issue since toward the ends of Eli. Who knows good O-line, and we could have another Super Bowl with Eli. Lou says, to be fair, Gettleman guys have been producing more than Shane's guys. That is true. Intel says, if you can't handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen. I'm not feeling what Kayvon did to Jordan today. Yeah, so those of you who didn't see, that was yesterday after the game, but Jordan asked a very fair question to Kayvon Thibodeau about, the pass rush facing high expectations coming out of a game where they didn't do much. And he basically next questioned him, said, "Does anybody else have a question?" and wouldn't look at him anymore. Was, immature and not something fans want to see or hear from a guy who is supposed to make a lot of plays and made essentially zero, including a 15-yard personal foul there, which Kayvon knows he didn't blow, but he's got to handle those situations differently. VF says this number one thing for Neighbors, unretire the jersey. Was all this distraction needed? Players go bust all the time. What are you doing? It was a very strange. I agree. David G says Daboll is starting to sound like Joe Judge. I assume you mean at the end, right? Daboll sounds like he knows he doesn't have the team and he doesn't have the answers. And so it's kind of playing out the string is what it sounds like. Eric says, I'm watching Purdy throw incredibly accurate passes and just wishing. Brett says Daboll's first and last great move was going for 2 against the Titans. Since then, kitten mittens. Kitten mittens. I like it. Someone put a counter on how many times they said better on their conference pressers, says VF. Yeah, right. R0B, what's up? Good to see you. R0B says, hey, Pat, what's good, brother? Hope all is well after this game Sunday. Where do you think things stand? And if a repeat performance comes next Sunday, do they make a change at QB? I think definitely by week 4, when they come back home, if it continues on this track where they come back home to face the Cowboys, yes, R0B, I think it's inevitable at that point. So does that mean that you put Drew Lock in against the Cleveland Browns in week 3? Or does that mean you give Daniel one more chance in week 3 before going to week 4? But I think very clearly in prime time on Thursday night against the Dallas Cowboys, if it continues like it happened, like that's what we're saying. If it stays the way it looked on Sunday against the Vikings and the offense is inept and Daniel's playing poorly, I don't know how you can run him out there, in front of the home crowd the way they treated him in week 1. It'll be an abject disaster against the Cowboys. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, by the way, 1-8 against the Cowboys and Eagles. BF says people seem to forget that they offered Saquon before DJ. Saquon was the one who balked. He wanted more guaranteed money. He felt like he had a bigger market, and it turned out he was right that he could make more money, and that teams valued him higher than what the Giants were offering him. So that was the reason why. D-Pat says Kayvon Thibodeau just starts slow. Poor offensive offseason conditioning. He will come on after the bye. Let's see. Taylor says the way we played the run this past week, I can already see Brian Robinson and Jaden Daniels giving this defense fits. Shaking my head. Exactly. Who calls 3 design runs off an ACL and neck injuries? Says Brett. Oh, yep. Right. Yeah. Daniel took a lot of hits. I think he had 5 sacks, 12 quarterback hits, and then he had 6 rushes on top of that. So that's a lot of hits in week 1 for Daniel Jones. And he took some really big ones too. VF says running back safeties. We need to build the trenches, not these luxury items. Maybe they'll have a high pick next year, says Pale. Yeah, right. Like I don't even trust them to make the right pick. See, that Pale Writer is hitting on the issue with Joe Schoen right now and the Giants. The issue right now is that, even if they have a high pick, hard to count on them making the right pick there, right? Right? So that's, I think, a major issue. Hold on 1 second. Had to just turn something off there. All right, let's see. What else do we got in the queue? Tommy says Bobby O, 2 tackles, 1 assist, Burns 0 sacks, Thibodeau no show, best thing, Dex sack, Muasau 4 tackles, 2 assists, 1 interception. Newbin 5 tackles, 2 assists, only 4 pass deflections by the team. Not enough run stops or pressures, just bad all around. VF says, what's up with Evan Neal? Just put him at guard already. They won't do it. He's their backup right tackle. They won't put him at guard. I don't get it. They have Stinney. They have, Van Roten. They have Runyon Jr. I just think they're I think they're hiding Evan Neal. I mean, I don't think they intend to play him at all. Brett says maybe Wink is a better head coach than a defensive coordinator. Snap. Ooh, there you go. A2Z Me says, if you want pressure, how about you come play hockey in Montreal? Yes, exactly. Michael says, do you think the compadres beat us? The game is away, another goose egg, and there has to be a change. My early thought on this game is that I think that, the Vikings have a better coaching staff than the Commanders. So Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores out coaching Shane Bowen and Brian Dable. Is Cliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn, is that duo going to outcoach Dable and Bowen the same way to the same length? I don't know that. If I stacked them, I would stack the Vikings higher and more capable of doing so than the Commanders. So in that sense, maybe the Giants have a little bit of a better shot. I do think they're going to struggle, as somebody said earlier, with more of a run-based approach coming from Jaden Daniels, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, short passes, catch and run. Terry McLaurin, obviously a tough player who always is a part of the game plan and somebody that the Giants are going to have to handle. And I think if they continue to play a lot of zone on defense, I think they're going to continue to get exposed. So I'm not optimistic that the Giants are going to win the game. Let's see. What is the line right now on this game? Let's see. I actually forgot to look. Let's see. Odds, NFL. All right. Let's see. Giants, Commanders. The Commanders are favored by 2.5. So the Commanders, favored by 2.5 points. So I think that's fair. So that means they're giving the Commanders 3 at home. So that means neutral site, the Giants would be favored by 0.5 point. And the over-under is 44. So that's a higher over-under than the, I think, 41.5 or something like that in week 1 that we had for Giants Vikings. Yeah, Michael says, sorry, Commanders. I like Compadres better than Commanders. Let's call them the Washington Compadres. Dave Z says, Ben, my dad's suit, McAdoo. Yeah, that was something. Vish says, Pat, when will this nightmare end with Mara acting like he's lost? Yeah, don't know, especially about the ownership question. I mean, that's a hard one to answer. Brett says, comeback player of the year will be Daniel Jones. Everybody but me will hate it. Hey, I'll love that if it happens. Come on. I just don't see it happening, but I would love it if it happens. Let's see. VF says, bless you, Pat. Thank you very much. 2 giant goofballs. What's going on? Sorry, I'm jumping around in the queue because we are running out of time here on Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard Live. But I appreciate you guys. I try to get through the entire queue. Doesn't always happen because lately more people have been weighing in and jumping in. So that's why the super chats are so important. If you purchase a super chat or super sticker, it'll elevate to the top of the queue and I will read it or address it immediately. Otherwise, just going through the queue chronologically, and sometimes it's tough to get all the way down there. But I appreciate everybody who weighed in. And if for some reason I don't get to your questions or comments in these scenarios, please pop back in the next time we do it. So that would be this Thursday during halftime of the Thursday night football game, and drop it in again. Guys, remember, we are sponsored by Estate 98 Coffee, all natural specialty coffee with no sugar, convenient for on the go. 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced coffee. Estate98.com/talkinball to get a special buy one, get one free deal. Also by Bet Online and by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code TalkinBall25 or access it through the QR code on your screen, You'll get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Go to boomchaga.com today. Right now, that means a month supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining me for another Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. If you guys missed it earlier, this will be loaded back onto the YouTube page. You get to watch the entire Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live episode. We'll also be live next on Thursday. If you missed it, please check out the First Down with Benny Fowler podcast we did on Monday, recapping the Week 1 NFL action. Really good insight around the league, including the Houston Texans, LA Rams, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, Giants, and on down the line. But thank you so much for weighing in. Giant Goofball is a good example. You will be able to go back and watch my answer about Jalen Hyatt. It boils down to more consistency they're looking for from him. But I got into detail on that about halfway or a little bit more into this 2-hour and 45-minute Talkin Ball live chat. Thank you so much. Check my social media for all of my coverage of the Giants throughout the week and of the NFL, and the nydailynews.com, New York Daily News website. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. See you next time on Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard.